My parents sued me for cutting off contact and tried to drag me back into their drama. Their manipulation led to a court battle. I got my friend's sister pregnant, but she lied about it. My parents disowned me, but now that they know the truth, they are pleading with me. Okay, so here's the thing. I need to get this off my chest because my life became a total wreck around a year ago. Let me begin at the beginning because, believe me, this is one of those situations where you're just like, seriously, what the hell? I never imagined that I'd be here sharing this on Reddit, but I suppose that's what happens when your family goes crazy and you're left standing there, wondering, how did this even happen? My friend Dave has a sister named Jenny. Both of them have been in my life for years. It's nothing big, is it? We all grew up in the same area and occasionally hang out. Jenny was never quite like the others. I don't mean to come across as cruel, but she was dealing with some mental health issues. To be honest, it wasn't my business, and I don't know all the specifics. Everyone knew Jenny struggled, but Dave never mentioned it much and I didn't ask. In any case, Jenny unexpectedly called me a year ago to tell me she was pregnant. All okay, that's cool. With the exception of one little detail, she claims that I am the father. I swear my brain just short-circuited at that very instant. I thought, wait, what? Now, let me be quite clear, I have never, ever hugged Jenny, much less had an intimate relationship with her. I was therefore unable to even comprehend her making such a ridiculous claim against me. I told her straight away, Jenny, I don't know what you're talking about, but there's no way I'm the father. We've never been close like that. However, she simply repeated it repeatedly, as if I were going to magically recall a night that never occurred. To put it mildly, it was strange. Though I was secretly freaking out, I attempted to remain composed, thinking perhaps this was a result of her mental health issues or something. This is the point at which things start to go wrong. A prenatal paternity test is something Jenny declines to take. She refused to move, even though I was sitting there thinking, if you're so sure it's my kid, why wouldn't you just take the test and prove it? It was a guilt trip city, and I wasn't buying it when she said things like, you need to be there for your child, and, you're abandoning us before the baby's even been born. I therefore made it plain that I would not sign anything if she chose not to take the test. I had no intention of legally binding myself to a child that wasn't mine. Easy, isn't it? That should be the end of it, I thought. I was mistaken, boy. The familial drama begins. My parents found out a few weeks later. My parents have this whole traditional values thing going on, and the moment they learn about the issue, they lose it, like, totally lose it. I still love them though. I'm just standing there trying to speak, but they're not listening, and they're calling me names and calling me a shame and a deadbeat. They wouldn't listen to me when I informed them, Mom, Dad, this isn't my kid. Jenny's just making stuff up. They couldn't seem to get rid of the idea that I was the one who brought this baby into the world. After that, there were many ugly arguments. To be honest, I'm still upset about things that were said that I probably can't take back. Despite my repeated assurances that it wasn't my child, my parents persisted in pressuring me to act morally and become a father. They didn't care about it. They saw me as already guilty. They stated they couldn't believe I would refuse my own child and that they didn't raise me to be a deadbeat. I was not even in the same state when Jenny would have become pregnant, which makes the situation even more bizarre. Yes, she allegedly became pregnant while spending a whole month at a friend's house. My parents dismissed this when I brought it up to them. People make mistakes, they stated. Yes, this was more than a simple error. This was a serious charge that might destroy my life. At this point, Jenny is approximately 6 months along in her pregnancy. The entire family has now turned against me. Every phone contact, text message, and family meal revolves around the idea that I must mature and assume responsibility for this child. I was going crazy. I felt as though I was in a bad dream, and no matter what I did or said, no one took me seriously. Fortunately, most of my friends supported me, but even a few of them began to have doubts. For example, are you sure, man? Maybe you don't remember something. My parents finally gave me the ultimatum. They're casting me out of their lives, disowning me, and kicking me to the curb if I don't take charge and behave like a father. They were dead serious, despite my initial belief that they were bluffing. They made it clear to me that I would no longer be accepted in the family if I didn't comply. Indeed, they disowned me after I refused to give in. That hurt, let me tell you. I was angry, perplexed, and simply hurt. They decided to believe someone else over me, even though they were the ones who reared me and were meant to support me. I was thrown out by my own family as if I didn't exist. It was cruel. After the baby was born, things became even more bizarre. Playing the part of a proud grandmother, my mother was present at the hospital. It wasn't until later that I found out. I had to deal with some legal issues to get the paternity test completed because Jenny was still refusing to do it. Guess what happened when the results were in? Not my child. I had no possibility of becoming the father. And I had a simultaneous feeling of relief and rage as soon as I held the paper in my hands. Finally, they'll see the truth. They'll realize they were wrong, and everything will go back to normal. That was my thought when I sent my parents the results. Instead, they began bombarding my phone with requests for forgiveness, money offers, and apologies. In an attempt to make things better, my dad even mailed me several $100s. The problem is that I retained the money. Yes, I did accept it. After everything they had to do to me, I felt like I owed them. But pardon them? I made it plain that I would not expose myself to such treachery again if they were prepared to disown me for such a thing. I understand, I truly do. While the majority of my friends supported me, others, along with my therapist, began to say things like, maybe you should give them another chance. They're your parents after all. However, how can you simply forgive someone who was willing to discard you so readily? When someone believes a falsehood about their own child, how can you trust them? I'm currently caught between the belief that I did nothing wrong and the question of whether I should even make an effort to mend my family's relationship. I can't get rid of the sensation that they let me down when I needed them the most, though, because every time I think about it, I recall how fast they betrayed me. Okay, so you would think that things would settle down after the drama involving Jenny's kid and my parents, wouldn't they? Not at all. My life had different ideas. If anything, the situation continued to get worse. You would think it would have ended with me proving I wasn't the father, but wow, I wish it had been that easy. It turns out that people would do anything to avoid accepting responsibility if they don't want to acknowledge that they made a mistake. I therefore thought, okay, now my parents will realize they were wrong, and maybe things can get back to normal, after the paternity test results showed that I wasn't the father. However, rather than providing the solace I had hoped for, things became much more problematic. To begin with, Jenny went totally crazy. She began circulating the area with tales that I had interfered with the test in some way or had fabricated it. Yes, you read correctly. She believed that I had somehow persuaded an entire laboratory to falsify the results to support my claims. I mean, how could I possibly do that? I'm not a genius who can rig DNA testing. I'm simply an ordinary guy. Jenny, however, was not listening. She was determined to paint me as the antagonist in her tale. She went around claiming that I had deceived everyone into believing I wasn't the father and that I was leaving her and the child. It didn't matter that it didn't make sense. People began to trust her. Rumors from small towns traveled quickly, and soon I was being seen as a scumbag by people at the grocery store. I even had people come right up to me and question why I wasn't taking charge of my child. It enraged me. Nobody appeared to care that I had the test results to show that I wasn't the father. I was being held responsible for something I had nothing to do with, while Jenny was out there acting like the victim. Never in my life have I felt so powerless. Being betrayed by your family is one thing, but what about when everyone in the community believes you are the villain? That has a distinct sound. What about my parents? They were still making an effort to be polite, but it was obvious that they were also at a loss for how to respond to the scenario. My mother kept phoning and leaving heartfelt, lengthy voicemails expressing her desire for her family to reunite. She wanted to brush everything under the rug, as if nothing had ever happened, and didn't even discuss what had transpired. She even invited me over for dinner, as if it would suddenly undo all the harm they had caused. It was offensive in addition to being awkward. They believed that a few family meals and some forced grins would make everything okay after what they had to do to me. Like they didn't even grasp how much trust they had broken, they just said, let's move on. There was no apology or recognition of how severely they had messed up. And that's the problem. Trust cannot be restored with a hug and a dinner once it has been shattered in that way. Rebuilding requires a lot of labor and effort, and they weren't even prepared to acknowledge their mistakes. The worst part was when my father attempted to buy me off. He simply emailed me to offer to buy me a new automobile if I returned to the family. As in, what? Did they believe they could simply buy my pardon? I wasn't even sure how to react because it was so disconnected from reality. For a long time, I just gazed at the email, trying to determine whether it was a cruel joke. My dad was serious though. I didn't answer. I was unable to. How can you respond to such a thing? Correctly repairing things was not important to them. Simply because it was convenient for them, they wanted me back in their life. And I became aware of how little they truly understood what they had done when they believed that hurling money at me would make everything better. The worst aspect, however, was discovering later that Jenny had begun contacting people I knew in an attempt to include them in her drama. She even tried to persuade Samantha, my ex-girlfriend, that I was this awful person who had left his child behind. After years of not communicating, Sam suddenly texted me, saying, "We need to talk." I didn't know what she was talking about at first, but when she revealed that Jenny had been attempting to rekindle old drama by contacting her, I nearly lost it. I told Jenny to cease over the phone. I wasn't going to allow her to include my friends and ex-partners in her mess. I was done with the lies and the games. However, she simply hung up after laughing. Talking to a wall was like that. Nothing I said would reach her since she was so engrossed in her fantasy world. By now, I was thinking about hiring a lawyer quite seriously. Even though I didn't want to go that far, I had no other option. I felt like I had no one on my side while Jenny was out there damaging my reputation and my parents were supporting her actions. Yes, I had the support of my closest friends, but even they were unaware of how awful things had gotten. At some point, I had to decide. I couldn't continue to wait for the next insane claim or rumor to surface, living in a condition of continual tension. I made the decision to sever all connections, not just with Jenny but also with my parents. It wasn't simple, in fact, it was awful. However, I realized I couldn't allow them to continue to bring me down. I sent my parents a lengthy email outlining my feelings of betrayal, my failure to trust them, and my inability to trust them going forward. Nothing was sugar-coated by me. I was honest with them, telling them that I wasn't ready to forgive them and that I wasn't sure if I would ever be. I advised them to start by sincerely apologizing and accepting responsibility for their conduct if they want to have any chance of a future relationship with me. No more acting as though nothing was wrong. There's no more ignoring issues. Regarding Jenny, I blocked her on all platforms. Her machinations were becoming too much for me to handle. I wasn't going to allow her to continue entangling me in her mess since she wasn't my concern. I even had to inform her brother Dave that I would not be able to spend some time with his family. Dave has always been a great buddy, so that was difficult, but I had to prioritize my own health. I took them off a few months ago, and to be honest, I've been relieved. Even if I occasionally feel bad or question my decision, I know that ultimately I made the right choice. Even though it's difficult, there are moments when you have to leave. It's messy and convoluted, to be sure, but at least I'm not always watching for the next catastrophe to occur. At last, I'm able to breathe. But man, I never would have believed you if you had told me a year ago that this is where I would wind up. I suppose that's just the way life is. First update. Okay, so this is where it gets even stranger. I believed that the pandemonium would be resolved if I severed my relationship with Jenny and my parents. I reasoned that if I cut them out of my life, everything would settle down and I could move on. Naturally, however, things are not so simple. Terminating them? And that was only the start of a whole new problem. A few weeks after blocking Jenny and sending the email to my parents, I received an unexpected contact from Mike, an old acquaintance from high school. He suddenly asked how I was doing, even though we hadn't spoken in years. Okay, that's random, I thought at first, but then he informed me that my parents contacted him. In the past, Mike and I weren't even that close, so why would my parents get in touch with him? That was a serious warning sign. It seems that they had been attempting to persuade others to speak with me on their behalf. I'm speaking of longtime acquaintances, distant family members, and even folks I don't really know. They were telling everyone that they were concerned about me and that I was in a horrible position. They seemed to be attempting to paint me as the unstable one. What's the worst? They were presenting the entire situation as though I should have apologized for interrupting them. Mike didn't mind. He wanted to alert me because he knew something was wrong, but it went beyond that. I began receiving messages from a wide range of people over the course of the following few days, including some I had just met a few times and others I hadn't spoken to in years. It was crazy, everything they were saying was the same. Your parents are really worried about you. Or, you should give them another chance. Somehow, they had persuaded everyone that I was the villain in this scenario, that I had lost my mind and had to make amends. It was unbelievable to me. My parents were out here waging a full-fledged public relations campaign to paint me as the villain while I was simply trying to move on with my life. I had the impression that I was in a strange parallel dimension where nothing made sense. I tried to avoid the drama as much as possible, but it kept coming back to me. When they contacted my employer, it was the last straw. You heard correctly, my parents gave my workplace a call. I'm not even sure how they obtained the number, but they managed to locate my boss's phone number and called the office to inform him that I wasn't feeling well. How embarrassing must that have been? One day, with a serious expression on his face, my employer took me into his office and asked me how things were at home. I was taken aback. At first, I wasn't even sure what to say, When your boss asks if your parents believe you've lost your mind, what do you say? Fortunately, he was really understanding when I told him the whole issue. Even if he expressed regret for bringing it up, the damage had already been done, guy. My own parents were now attempting to interfere with my work. They seemed intent on ruining everything for me simply because I refused to comply with their demands. Then there was nothing I could do. To obtain a restraining order against them, I went to a lawyer and began the process. Even though I didn't want to go that far, I had no other option. They were interfering with my friends, my career, and my mental health. Even if it meant officially cutting them off, I had to defend myself. The procedure was drawn out and tense. Along with the paperwork and court dates, there was a great deal of tension. However, I also experienced a strange sense of relaxation. I felt like I was finally taking charge of the matter. I will no longer allow them to take over every aspect of my life. No more allowing them to control the story. Naturally, chaos ensued when they learned about the restraining order. In a lengthy, guilt-ridden email, my mother told me how she never thought her own son would act in this way and that families should always remain united. She said that I was the source of all the suffering and that I was destroying the family. I didn't bite, but it was textbook manipulation. I didn't answer. It grew worse before it got better, though I wish I could say that was the end of it. One day, my car was vandalized when I got home from work. The word liar had been keyed into its side by someone. I didn't have any evidence that it was my parents, but really, who else could it be? Other than a few close friends, I hadn't disclosed the restraining order to anyone. The only people with an incentive to do such a thing were my parents. They had to strike out in any way they could since it seemed like they couldn't lose control. I reported it to the police, but it was never resolved. Another reminder that sometimes the ones who should love you the most can become your worst adversaries, even if you attempt to do things the right way. In order to be safe, I then began parking my car at a friend's house. I have to stop taking chances. In case they tried something similar, I even put security cameras around my apartment. I had the impression that I was constantly on edge, waiting for anything to happen. But after a while, things began to settle down. After the restraining order was granted, my parents were prohibited from getting in touch with me or visiting my house or place of employment. My shoulders were greatly relieved. I was able to breathe for the first time in what seemed like an eternity. Even after several months, I'm still getting my bearings. I had to explain the entire scenario to my friends and coworkers and make sure they understood the truth, which required a lot of damage control. While some were doubtful, the majority were supportive. Do you honestly think your folks would go that far? I understand. It's difficult to accept. You understand, however, how far some individuals will go when they feel like they're losing control since you've been there yourself. In retrospect, I never thought things would become this terrible. It's amazing how easily a family may turn against you if you don't follow their rules. All of this has taught me one vital lesson, though. You cannot allow anyone, not even your family, to dictate how you live your life. Even if it hurts, there are times when you have to make the difficult decision to leave. I have no idea what the future holds for my parents and me. Perhaps they will come to their senses and truly apologize. Perhaps not. In any case, I'm done allowing them to rule my life. I'm not looking back. I have my own road to follow. Second update. Okay, so this is when things start to change. I assumed things would finally calm down when I obtained the restraining order and began attempting to start over. Unexpectedly, however, life had other ideas. My folks found a new method to play tricks on me just when I was starting to feel like I could breathe again. It wasn't direct contact this time. It wasn't sending emails or damaging my car. No, this was messed up on a completely different level. I'm sitting at home one day, taking care of nothing, when I receive a letter in the mail. That's not too strange, is it? This letter, however, came from a lawyer. I initially assumed it had to do with the restraining order, possibly some last-minute paperwork or something. However, no. A lawsuit was filed. For what, you ask? My own parents were suing me. Suffering on an emotional level. I was reading something that I couldn't even believe. They were actually suing me for interrupting them, claiming they were entitled to compensation since my actions had seriously damaged their mental well-being. They went so far as to say that I had cut them off from the rest of the family, which was absurd because it was they who isolated me, not the other way around. For a good 5 minutes, I just sat there and stared at the letter, trying to take in the situation. Who, after all, does that? Because they are upset over being cut off, who sues their own child? I was at a loss for what to do. There was a part of me that was extremely worried out, and another part of me wanted to chuckle at how absurd it all was. This was legal now, and it was going to get really unpleasant. It was no longer just a family drama. I immediately called my attorney. This was too much for me to do alone. I was as surprised as she was. She had witnessed many unpleasant family issues, but bringing a lawsuit against your own child for emotional distress? Even for her, that was novel. We discussed the lawsuit's specifics, and even though most of it was obviously false, I felt we couldn't ignore it. Since they were sincere, I had to defend myself. The weeks that followed were filled with stress, phone calls, and meetings. The findings of the paternity test, the restraining order, and the harassment I had been experiencing were all pieces of proof I needed to collect. It felt unreal that it had come to this, even though my lawyer was sure we could win. When I refused to allow my parents to dominate me anymore, they tried to drag me through the mud in court. The problem is that they went beyond the case. Unfortunately, they had to go farther. In an attempt to turn other family members against me, they began contacting them. I began receiving messages from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years, including aunts, uncles, and cousins. "Why can't you just make peace with your parents?" was what they were all saying. "You're acting self-centered." They seemed to have been indoctrinated to believe that I was the bad guy in this whole situation. I was incensed about the entire scenario, not just my parents. It seemed like they always managed to change the story and paint me as the villain, regardless of what I did or how hard I tried to defend myself. Because you set limits, your parents are suing you for emotional distress. How can you convey that to someone who is only hearing one side of the story? I eventually had to cut off even more individuals because of it. I unfriended people on social media, blocked family members, and generally cut off any ties to that aspect of my life. I couldn't keep defending myself to people who had already made up their minds, not because I didn't care about them, I did. It was tiring, and I had had enough of defending my choices to those who refused to consider the wider picture. The court date eventually arrived. I arrived with my attorney, ready for whatever bullshit they would hurl at me. And it was a circus, I tell you. My parents had a full sob story prepared about how they had always supported me, how they had attempted to help me get through difficult times, and how I had rudely interrupted them without cause. Since they were the ones who initially disowned me, it was quite amazing how they portrayed themselves as the victims in all of this. But it didn't sit well with my lawyer. She dissected their claims in detail, presenting the judge with all of the proof of their harassment, including the paternity test and the restraining order. By the end of it, you could tell the court wasn't buying their story, and it was awful. The judge gave me a favorable ruling. In the end, it was a minor success because the lawsuit was obviously dismissed and my parents were compelled to pay my legal bills. It didn't feel like a victory, though, even though I did win. There was still a lot of aftermath to cope with, and it seemed like I had just left a nightmare. My parents made a last-ditch attempt to reintegrate into my life following the case. They wrote me this lengthy, heartfelt letter in which they expressed their regret for everything, their desire to put things right, and their inability to stand the thought of losing me. To be honest, I didn't even answer, and it was the same old guilt-tripping rubbish they had been doing from the beginning. I had already decided that I would not return. A person can only endure so much until they are forced to leave permanently. Indeed, it was painful. No matter how terrible things become, it's not simple to cut off your family. However, there are situations when it's essential for your own mental health. No matter how much they pretended to love me, I couldn't allow them to continue entangling me in their mess. I refused to let their poisonous form of love to continue to contaminate my life. That's where I am at the moment. I'm moving on, the restraining order is still in effect, and the case is behind me. Although it hasn't been simple, I'm learning to live without the commotion and the never-ending worry about when the next catastrophe will strike. It feels pretty damn wonderful to feel like I have some control over my life for the first time in a long time. I have no idea what the future will bring. Perhaps things will change in the future. They might not. But for now, I'm concentrating on taking care of myself and repairing the aspects of my life that they attempted to destroy. Though it has taken a while, I am beginning to glimpse the end of the tunnel. Third update. Okay, so if you've been following along, you would think that the restraining order and the legal issue would put an end to the chaos. However, no. My family managed to give me a final surprise. To be honest, this one made me shake my head since I didn't believe they could go any lower. However, here we are. The situation had finally begun to settle down a few months following the court's decision in my favor. For the first time in what seemed like an eternity, I was able to concentrate on starting again after severing my connections with everyone who was stressing me out. No letters from lawyers, no sporadic communications from old friends, just quiet. At least that's what I believed. I ran into my cousin Melissa one day while out on errands, doing routine tasks like grocery shopping. Now, throughout all of this drama, Melissa and I hadn't spoken much. Although we were never particularly close as children, we always got along. I decided to say hello to her when I spotted her. We ended up talking for a while, and initially it was just your typical conversation, catching up on work, life, and other things. She suddenly interrupts me, though, saying, "Hey, did you hear what your parents are planning?" I went cold. "Are you planning?" I asked, experiencing that old pit in my gut all of a sudden. Melissa sighed and continued, although she appeared a little uneasy, as if she wasn't sure if she should even tell me. "Yes, next month there will be a large family reunion. It seems that they have been telling everyone that they hope you and them will be able to reconcile." It was unbelievable to me. They were actually preparing an ambush reunion in an attempt to reintegrate me into the family. They were inviting everyone, including distant relatives, family friends, and individuals I hadn't seen in years, Melissa revealed when I asked for more information. What's the kicker? They had been pretending that I was aware of the entire situation and informing everyone that I would be present. I was enraged. They had made me out to be the villain if I didn't turn up, even though I hadn't agreed to anything. My parents' standard tactic was to control the issue, paint me as the bad guy, and attempt to guilt-trip me into complying with their wishes. I told Melissa up front that I wasn't going, and I thanked her for informing me. Even she appeared somewhat conflicted, as if she were falling for my parents' "we just want to fix things" line of reasoning. She wanted me to go and put things right, and I could see it in her expression. However, I was not going to fall into that trap after everything they had done. That evening, I went home and gave it a lot of thought. I felt compelled to say something even though I knew I wouldn't be attending the reunion. Since I couldn't ignore this, I made the decision to send my parents a final email outlining everything in detail. I sat down and sent them an email the following morning. It was brief but straightforward. I informed them that I was aware of the reunion and that I would not be attending. I made it plain that I didn't want to participate in any coerced reconciliation, certainly not in front of a large group of people. I advised them to respect my limits first if they were sincere about making things right. And there was nothing else to discuss until they were able to accomplish it. To be honest, I didn't need a response and didn't anticipate one. This was the last time I needed to correct the record. Naturally, though, my parents were unable to ignore it. My dad phoned me a few days later. He left a lengthy, meandering voicemail about how I was destroying the family and how this reunion was meant to be a new beginning for everyone, but I didn't answer. He even said, "Your grandparents would be so disappointed in how you're handling this," in an attempt to put me under guilt. That voicemail really got to me. It made me think of all the times my parents had manipulated me and used guilt to get what they wanted, not because I believed it. They would use any tactic they could to make me feel like the issue, even if it meant bringing up my grandparents, who, incidentally, had always been there for me. They were unable to acknowledge that perhaps, just possibly, they were the ones who needed to examine themselves closely. I left the voicemail unanswered. What was the purpose? I was not going to allow them to drag me back into their drama after I had finished speaking. However, it continued to bother me for days after that. I thought I was simply refusing to make peace, and I kept thinking about the reunion and all the family who would be present. I questioned how many of them were receiving the distorted version my parents were giving them, and how many of them truly understood the whole story. In the aftermath of the reunion, I never heard from my parents again. On Facebook, I came across pictures of joyful grins, family embraces, and other such scenes. My parents were grinning and behaving as if nothing had happened, as if they hadn't just spent the last year attempting to ruin my life. Seeing them act as though everything was flawless was strange. However, I suppose they were always skilled at acting. Melissa informed me the reunion had been unpleasant when I saw her again a few weeks later. It seems that many people were expecting me to arrive, and some awkward talks ensued when I didn't. According to Melissa, my parents' attempts to explain my absence were not well received. Some family members even began to wonder why I wasn't present and why my parents hadn't been more forthright about the whole thing. After all, I suppose not everyone believed their story. And I suppose that's the current situation. Even though I've been able to put the drama behind me, I know it's always there, just beneath the surface. I've come to terms with the fact that my parents are unlikely to acknowledge their mistakes. I can't alter them, but I can safeguard myself, continue to live my life independently of them, and concentrate on the individuals who genuinely care about me. It has been a long journey, and I will admit that there are still moments when it hurts. It's difficult to cut off relatives, and sometimes I question whether I made the right decision. But I knew in my heart that I had to. They kept attempting to pull me into a toxic loop, but I had to choose me, my future, and my mental health. That concludes this crazy journey. Things may or may not change in the future. In any case, I'm tired of allowing my family to dictate how I live. Now that I have my own road to follow, I'm doing it on my own terms for the first time in a long time. My wife disappeared after a girls' trip, and now she's trying to manipulate her way back into my life, acting like nothing ever happened. It's common to hear statements like, "I never saw it coming." That's precisely how it went for me, though. I was married to my wife for the entire 4 years that we were together. To be honest, I thought we were doing well. For the most part, I believed that we were in agreement, and we had plans and a life plan laid out. The problem is that we both desired children. Or I believe that we both did. As soon as we were married, we began to discuss it seriously. She would constantly express her desire for 2 or 3 children, rambling on about the names we would give them, the nursery decor, and everything else. She would even spend time on the internet planning our future children's lives while perusing baby gear and clothing. It kept us connected and was sort of our thing to talk about. We were eager to begin this new chapter in our lives together, and everything appeared to be going according to plan. But after that, we received some terrible news, which really devastated me. We visited a doctor to find out what was wrong after a few months of trying to conceive. To cut a long tale short, it was me. The doctor essentially informed us that our chances of naturally becoming parents were very limited because my count was much too low. It felt like a stomach punch. I felt worthless. Our entire set of plans vanished in a flash. I was hit hard, terribly hard, by the news. I ended up for a while in a fairly awful position. I was a complete disaster at first, but therapy ultimately helped. At first, she seemed to be rather supportive, stating that it didn't matter and that she would be content with us alone. However, there was something strange about the way she said it right from the start. She seems to have dropped it far too soon. She was all about starting a family one minute, and then she claimed she didn't need children to be content. I understand that people change their ideas, but her entire demeanor seemed strange to me. From thinking about baby names, she had completely stopped talking about children. Furthermore, it seemed as though she began to view me in a different light. She would suddenly start making little jabs at me that she had never mentioned before, like how I wasn't taking care of myself, that I should work out, or that I should be more productive around the house. Yes, I could have gained a few pounds, but it seemed like she was constantly looking for reasons to accuse me. She would dismiss it when I questioned her about the abrupt shift in attitude. She would claim that I was being unduly sensitive and that I was only dreaming. But I was aware of a problem. She was different from the lady I married, the one who would spend hours sitting with me discussing our future. She wasn't particularly cruel, but there was a certain coldness about her, as if she had already mentally checked out and was merely doing the part. I suppose that as time went on, I began to trust her when she assured me that everything was okay. In order to avoid coming out as needy or insecure, I quit pressing. In any case, after a few years, we were only getting by. We had gotten into a pattern where we hardly discussed anything important. We seemed more like housemates than husband and wife. She would always dismiss my attempts to discuss other choices, such as adoption or surrogacy, by stating that she didn't want to consider them. I never really believed her when she said, "As long as we're together, I'm happy." She seemed more concerned with persuading herself than I was. Suddenly, she informs me she wants to take a girls' trip. Now, traveling with her buddies was nothing out of the ordinary. She had previously done it a few times, and I had always encouraged her. For a long, she talked about wanting to travel to America with her pals, while we lived in Brighton. We had developed this trust over the years, so I didn't give it a second thought. I therefore made sure she had everything she needed, assisted her with packing, and drove her to the airport. I recall her final words before she departed. She turned to me and said, "Thank you for being so supportive." I found it a little strange that she would say that because I hadn't done anything particularly noteworthy, but she appeared so sincere that I dismissed it as her simply expressing gratitude. I remained up that night to make sure things went well by calling her when she landed. I kept myself occupied around the house, watching TV, keeping an eye on the time, and waited for her to text me to let me know she had landed because her flight was expected to take roughly 9 hours. I called her to check in as soon as I noticed her flight had landed. The phone kept ringing, but no one picked it up. I didn't give it much thought because I assumed she was exhausted and might have gone directly to her hotel and crashed. However, when morning arrived, I still hadn't heard from her. I began to have this nagging concern in the back of my mind. I thought perhaps she was simply busy or her phone was on quiet, so I tried calling again and then texted her a few times. However, I was officially freaking out after a couple more hours of radio silence. In the end, I gave her sister a call to check whether she had heard from her. Nothing. I was really beginning to freak out by this point. In the hopes that something had gone wrong with her phone or that she just hadn't had time to check in, I even went so far as to call her companions, who were meant to be traveling with her. However, they were also perplexed when I called them. They did not accompany her on the trip. Back at home, they were enjoying coffee while seated 2 streets away. It truly hit me at that point. She wasn't traveling with any girls. She didn't have any friends. She hadn't accompanied anyone anywhere. She simply vanished. It seemed as though my stomach had fallen through the floor as I sat there with the phone. I was unable to comprehend it. Why would she tell me such a lie? Why wouldn't she notify me before leaving? I made an effort to persuade myself that it was an error of some sort, such as perhaps she had missed a connecting flight or that she had been unable to contact due to an emergency. But I knew in my heart that she had this planned. Her expressing "thank you for being so supportive" and the entire girls' trip were all components of whatever she had been imagining. I was at a loss for what to do. I couldn't wake up, as if I were living in a nightmare. I had never married a woman like this. I didn't even recognize this person. The coldness, the way she had stopped discussing our future, and those small digs about my appearance and health all began to make sense. I simply hadn't noticed, or perhaps I hadn't wanted to see, that she had been drifting away for a while. I just sat there looking at my phone that night, hoping for a call, a text, anything. However, nothing materialized, and I knew in my heart that it wouldn't. I remember lying there and staring at the ceiling when I woke up the following morning, thinking that it was all just a bad dream. But when she saw that her side of the bed was empty, reality set in. In fact, she had gone. After packing her bags, she disappeared. The promises I had given myself the previous evening, maybe she was late, or perhaps her phone died, were no longer valid. She had clearly planned this and wanted to go. I was completely in denial for the first few days. I would keep ringing her phone in the hopes of hearing her voice and perhaps receiving an explanation. I even left messages. I kept leaving them in the hopes that she would understand, even though I was half the time at a loss for words. However, I only received quiet, which strangely made things worse. It was as though I had been a stranger to her all along and had been left to work things out on my own without knowing what had gone wrong. Her family was initially just as surprised as I was. They hadn't heard from her, and her mother didn't know anything about her plans. In the end, I visited there more times than I could remember in order to speak with her mother and get answers. They must have felt sorry for me. When I couldn't bring myself to cook, her mom would prepare meals for me and occasionally let me stay there. She would sit there while I talked about all the tiny things that didn't make sense, attempting to figure out how my life had suddenly become so complicated. And to be honest, there were times when I was too numb to speak and just sat there in silence. I oscillated between rage, despair, and remorse. What went wrong was a question I kept asking myself. Was there a sign I missed? Was I not paying enough attention to her? On certain days, I would review all of our arguments and conversations in an attempt to determine what caused her to leave. I kept thinking about what I could have done better and how I could have preserved our marriage. It may sound dramatic, but I was completely preoccupied with figuring it out. It seemed as though the solution would somehow make everything better. I hardly slept or ate, and my work also began to suffer. People took notice. When they inquired about my well-being, I would just dismiss it by claiming that I was occupied with personal matters. Admitting the truth, the fact that my wife abandoned me without saying a word, was embarrassing. I eventually told a few close friends, and they tried their best to divert my attention by bringing me out to hang out and encouraging me to move on. However, I would still ponder about her, wondering where she was and why I wasn't enough to keep her around, even when I was with them. The incessant inquiries from strangers, including neighbors, relatives, acquaintances, and even former co-workers who had heard I was married, were among the worst aspects. It was like pulling out a new scab each time somebody asked, "How's married life treating you?" And "How's your wife?" I would just smile and tell them that everything was good since I lacked the courage to tell them she had left. But each time I repeated that untruth, it felt more weighty. The only thing that worked in the end was therapy. Although I had never gone before, I realized I couldn't manage it alone after a few months of hardly functioning. In order to talk to someone who was impartial and unfamiliar with our baggage, I contacted a therapist and began attending once a week. It was beneficial. I would express my rage, betrayal, and the void she had left in my life. I would talk endlessly about the restless evenings and how I would lie awake repeatedly reliving everything. The therapist assisted me in realizing that she would not have remained here if it had been a magical moment. It wasn't my fault. She made the decision to go. It was a difficult pill to take. I had the feeling that I was flawed and had somehow alienated her for a long time. However, I gradually began to see things differently. I chose to overlook her long-standing coldness and distance, assuming that things would improve on their own. I had persuaded myself that I could maintain my composure and that our marriage could be saved by my efforts alone. The realization that it wasn't hurt. As time passed, I began to restore my life in tiny increments. It wasn't until she departed that I realized how much I had lost in our marriage. I had always been the one who tried his hardest to make sure she was content and that our home life was comfortable. But now that I had so much free time, I was at a loss for what to do. I therefore began resuming old pastimes that I had forgotten about. I tried cooking new meals, went to the gym, and started reading literature I had been putting off. Eventually, the work also improved. I was hardly keeping up with my job at first, simply going through the motions. However, when I began to feel more like myself, I worked harder at my job. I felt like I still had control over something in my life, which was one of the few things that gave me a sense of accomplishment. Although I had always been skilled at what I did, I now give it my all, the extra hours, the concentration. I got a promotion as a result of it, something I never would have obtained if I had been moping about my problems. Even yet, there were painful days. A picture, an old movie ticket stub, or other small items that brought back memories I'd tried to forget would occasionally remind me of her. Looking at them, I would question her actions, whether she ever considered me, and whether she ever felt bad about what she had done. But gradually, those times began to disappear. I was able to let go of those memories a little more quickly and move on a little more easily each time. Additionally, I got back in touch with people I hadn't seen much of since getting married. We resumed our activities, including hiking and hitting the golf range, something I hadn't done in years. Having folks by my side who weren't involved in the mess and who could support me in moving on without pulling me back into the agony was a relief. In hindsight, I saw that I had invested much too much of myself in that relationship, in being her spouse. I felt like I had lost a significant portion of who I was when she departed, as if she had taken a piece of me with her. But I was rediscovering who I was, piece by piece. Although it wasn't quick or simple, I was making progress. I was finally able to see someone who wasn't defined by her past actions when I looked in the mirror at the conclusion of that year. I wasn't just the man whose wife had abandoned him. I had rebuilt, I had survived, and I was stronger now. I felt as like I could truly live my life without her shadow looming over me for the first time in years. To be honest, I took pride in that. I believed I had moved on from everything. After all that chaos, life had at last begun to seem normal again, or as close to normal as it could be. My work was going really well, my friends kept me occupied, and I had my routine down pat. Even my daily thoughts about her had stopped. Even while I still occasionally had flashbacks to odd memories, it wasn't as frequent as it used to be, when everything I did was somehow related to her. She was therefore the last person I expected to see standing there when someone knocked on my door one Saturday morning. But there she was with a baby at my doorway. I went cold. It was like witnessing a ghost, and for a moment my brain simply stopped functioning. Though perhaps a touch worn down, she still had her typical appearance. She looked at me as if she genuinely believed that I would be pleased to see her. I thought I was past caring, so yes, that really got to me. As it happens, meeting her again evoked many feelings I had previously suppressed. At first, I remained silent. I just stared as I stood there. As if nothing had happened, she gave me a smile before asking, "May I come in?" The nerve. Really, I mean it. She just shows up here as if I should be welcoming her back with open arms after everything she's done. However, I maintained my composure and told her, "No, you can stay right there," explaining that I didn't want her in my home bringing all that commotion back into the one area I had created for myself. Despite her rather disoriented appearance, she remained in her spot and simply launched into her story. She began by saying, "I know this might be a shock, but I wanted to come back and explain everything." Her expression was hopeful, as though she truly thought I would be willing to listen. I was tempted to just close the door and laugh in her face, but I was too intrigued. I was curious about the reason behind her disappearance and what she had come up with. She continued by explaining that she had erred in leaving and that she had come to the realization that she had lost the greatest thing that had ever occurred to her, not my words, but hers. She claimed to have thought a lot and to have finally realized what was important in life after having this child. After years of ignoring me, it seemed that what mattered most was unexpectedly knocking on my door. "This is our second chance," she remarked, glancing down at the infant. What I was hearing was unbelievable. Our second opportunity? As if this child were some sort of magical reset button that would allow us to resume where we left off. I was furious on the inside, but I attempted to maintain a neutral appearance. She continued by adding that although she had made a grave error, we could now start over, just the three of us. She wanted us to be a family once more. "Why did you leave?" was the final question that had been bothering me ever since she appeared. I tried to speak as steadily as I could, but I wasn't sure how much longer I could contain myself. Now that she was here, I needed to hear it from her since I had tortured myself with all the possibilities for years in an attempt to comprehend. After hesitating and glancing down at her feet as if embarrassed, she finally told me the truth, or at least what I thought it was. She acknowledged that she had left because she wanted a child and had found someone who could provide one for her because I couldn't. She honestly stated it as if it were insignificant, as though she hadn't destroyed my life, and as though I should just nod and take it as gospel. She clarified that although the man she had left didn't stay, she had already given birth and had suddenly come to the realization that she wanted me back. Easy. I paused to think about what she was saying. She was here, confessing that she had left me, fled with a man, had his child, and now expected me to accept it. As if I should simply forget and forgive. So you left, found someone else, had his baby, and now you think you can come back and pretend like nothing happened? I asked her. She broke down in tears and apologized, admitting that she had made a big mistake, but I remained unmoved. She kept talking about how she knew she was supposed to be with me and that I was the one she really loved. To be honest, maintaining a straight face was difficult. She sounded so crazy that I was shocked. I could see it clearly on her face that this was desperation, not love. She then attempted to guilt-trip me by talking endlessly about how difficult it had been for her to be a single mother. In fact, she attempted to paint herself as the victim in all of this, acting as though her decisions hadn't brought her to this point. She assured me she was prepared to work things out this time and that she wanted my help. Who does she think I am? Was all I could think about. I listened to it all as I stood there, but I had had enough. I told her right away, you made your choice a long time ago, and now you have to live with it. There's no second chance here. She appeared astonished, as if she had never even imagined that I would say no, as if she truly believed she could simply saunter back into my life because it would suit her. She became irate just when I thought she would finally understand and depart. She became angry with me, accusing me of selfishness and demanding that I give her another chance to make amends. She said that she could have taken half of everything and divorced me at that time if she had so desired. She even had the audacity to remark that the house should still belong to her. I felt a surge of relief as it seemed like her true self was revealing itself in front of me. At last, I was recognizing her true self. I refrained from arguing with her. I didn't speak louder. We're done. You wanted a different life, and now you have it. This isn't my responsibility anymore. I simply replied, looking at her, and then I closed the door in her face, interrupting her if she had any more words to say. I was struck with a peculiar sense of serenity as I stood there and heard her muffled screaming coming from the other side of the door. She might shout, cry, knock, or do anything else. However, I knew I would never allow her to return. This stranger who believed she could pick up the pieces when it was convenient for her took the place of the lady I had loved and married. Feeling lighter than I have in years, I moved away from the door and took a seat. I believed that was it after I shut the door behind her. I assumed she would understand and simply walk away. However, no. Rather, she began pounding on the door while shouting various things. The nerve seemed unbelievable to me. She had the gall to stand there and insist that I listen to her while I was in the one place that was truly mine, the only place I had been able to recover from the disaster she had left me in. I initially considered ignoring it and letting her scream till she became weary. But then I started to wonder. I was curious to know what kinds of excuses she would offer this time. I opened the door just enough to let her know I was paying attention, but not enough to let her in. She appeared to be astonished that I hadn't given her the response she desired, as if she had just been slapped across the face. As if we were having a typical argument and not coping with her abandonment, she began a lengthy monologue in which she expressed her willingness to forgive me for closing the door on her and her want to start over. She went on and on about how if we both worked hard, we could work things out. I was unable to contain myself at that moment. I laughed, really laughed, because this woman had more nerve than I had ever seen. When I did that, she appeared enraged, as if I should feel guilty for not paying attention to her. I said to her, "You left. You had your chance, and you threw it all away. I'm not just going to pretend none of that happened because you feel like it." Her face flushed, and she began to talk about how she had been so lost after leaving and how she had discovered her error too late. "You don't understand how hard it was for me," she said. However, I didn't believe it. I informed her that she had taken the decision to leave. She had plotted it, made up a falsehood about it, and then carried it out. Now her remorse meant nothing. That's when she lost it. Her entire tone shifted. She stopped doing the melancholy, repentant act and began to attack me, accusing me of being unjust and lacking the grace to give her another chance. If I'd wanted to, I could have taken everything from you back then. I could have taken half of everything you own, she bravely said. I simply stood in awe. This woman, who had abandoned me without saying anything, now believed she should be compensated in some way for not attempting to defraud me. As if she was worthy of praise for not being as awful as she could have been. I replied, "So, what am I supposed to be grateful for? Grateful that you only ditched me and didn't take my stuff with you?" Her expression was a mixture of rage and something more, possibly desperation or guilt, as she gazed at me. But to be honest, I didn't give a damn by then. I had just finished. That was where all the years I had spent questioning myself, feeling bad, and wondering if I was somehow to blame for her leaving vanished. I felt as though the burden I had been dragging about had finally been removed when I met her for who she truly was. But she wasn't finished. She began to pace my porch while complaining that I would regret not giving her another chance and that I would never find someone like her. In fact, by refusing to take her back, she attempted to make me feel as though I was the one who was missing out. It was strange. As if I should be pleading with her to stay, here she was, the one who ruined everything we owned. She became even louder and continued to complain about how I had made her leave in the first place when she realized I wasn't going to back down. She said that none of this would have occurred if I had been more understanding about the entire kid situation. Her reasoning seemed to indicate that I had failed her as a husband because I couldn't conceive, which somehow excused her from leaving to have a kid with someone else. The mental acrobatics were amazing. To be honest, I was shocked that she was attempting to blame me for her decisions. I straight up told her, "Look, if you wanted a kid that badly, you could have told me the truth. You didn't have to lie to my face and pretend everything was fine while planning your exit." To that, she had nothing to say. Simply looked at me as if I had hit her. However, I prevented her from speaking. I said, "You made that choice all on your own, and now you've got to live with it. That's not my problem." She made one final attempt, returning to her dejected expression, and urged me to consider the boy and how I was being unjust by ignoring him. She literally exploited the child in her arms to make me feel guilty, as if I were the villain in this situation. However, I wasn't buying into it. I replied, "I don't know that child. I have nothing to do with him. He's not mine, and neither are you." That was the end of it. I could see her coming to terms with it at last. She was aware that I would never change my mind, and that I would never allow her to return to my life. I could see the rage waning and being replaced by something else, either genuine regret or simply exasperation. However, I didn't care. She had attempted to walk all over me and expected me to smile and give her credit, but now she was simply a stranger. For a few more seconds, she stood there as if she was waiting for me to decide to call her back. I didn't say anything else though. When it finally hit her that I meant every word, I just stood there and watched her expression. I closed the door without giving it another glance. I also didn't wait for her to rap on it again this time. In my heart, I knew that I had already made up my mind and that there was no turning back. I don't know, but I felt like I had finally won as I moved away from the door. It was over, even though she had spent so much time hoping to return and use manipulation to get back into my life. I had freedom. Neither for her nor for us was there going to be another chance. She was now only a memory, one that I had at last relegated to the past. I felt like I could breathe again after all those years of suffering and shame. And what do you know? It was pleasant. I experienced an odd sense of tranquility as soon as I shut that door behind her. I no longer felt sad, furious, or even astonished. It was as though all of the effort I had put into her over the years, all of the sorrow, the shame, and the never-ending wondering, had simply disappeared. I was prepared to move on since I had at last found the closure I didn't realize I needed. This time, everything was truly finished, but naturally, it wasn't as tidy a conclusion as I had planned. Her mother texted me a few days later. She apologized, stating she was embarrassed by her daughter's handling of the situation and that she had attempted to reason with her, but clearly it had failed. Her mother was a kind person. She had been quite helpful to me when her daughter departed, and I could see that she was truly distressed by the situation. Although I had nothing against her, I didn't want to be dragged back into that situation. I simply said, "Thanks for checking in response," and didn't say anything further. I wasn't going to waste time justifying my choice, and I wasn't going to offer her mother any more information. She knew it was over because she understood. I learned tidbits over the course of the following few weeks via social media and mutual connections. She had apparently returned to living with her parents, and things weren't going well. The father of the child, the man she had left me for, was not involved at all. He had bailed out. She was left to figure things out on her own because, apparently, he hadn't committed to the long term. Few individuals were eager to help because she had essentially burned every bridge. Her former friends, who had supported me when she first vanished, didn't feel sorry for her. They weren't eager to get drawn back into her drama because they had all moved on. You can't hold them responsible. Her parents weren't too happy either. They didn't have enough money to sustain her and the child. I was aware of this since her father called me shortly after her mother texted me. Curiosity overcame me, and I nearly didn't respond. He was direct but courteous. He mentioned that they were having financial difficulties and suggested that I might be able to assist them in some way. He continued talking about the infant and how difficult things were for them, saying, "We know you cared about her once." I listened courteously, but I couldn't help but giggle a little, not aloud, but you get the idea, when he began to talk endlessly about how his daughter only needed a little help to get back on her feet. I politely informed him that his daughter made her own decisions and that I was neither in a position nor in the right frame of mind to assist. Since he didn't pursue it further, I believe he understood the message. Before I know it, her friends, people I hadn't spoken to in years, began contacting me. Some attempted to use the guilt angle, claiming that she was going through a difficult moment and that perhaps I could find it in my heart to give her another chance. She even had the audacity to say that the child needed a father figure and that I shouldn't allow my resentment stand in the way of my efforts to assist him. However, I refused to back down. I refused to allow anyone to make me feel guilty for making my own decision at last. I had given that woman all I had after years of feeling inadequate, and she had tossed it all away. Instead of relying on me to save her, she should at least take responsibility for her decisions. The calls and messages gradually decreased in volume before ceasing completely. Everyone seemed to finally realize that I was serious, that I had moved on, and that I would not get ensnared again. That's when the true calm arrived. For the first time in years, my life felt peaceful and typical. I had my friends, my job, and my routines. I had rebuilt my life on my own terms, so it wasn't a fancy, glamorous one, but it was mine. The irony is that I once again began to discover joy in the small things, which I had not given much thought to when I was married. I would read novels I had been meaning to read for years, cook my own food, and take walks. It felt good to be free, and I understood that I could live my life as I pleased without anyone's approval. I wasn't always concerned about other people's happiness or approval, for once. I felt as though I had gradually regained my life. Occasionally, I would stumble into someone who knew us both, and they would inquire, "Hey, what happened to her?" I would respond with a succinct, courteous response and shift the topic. I simply didn't want to keep going back to a chapter that was so obviously over. It wasn't that I was concealing anything. I had finally mastered the skill of leaving her in the past. When I last heard from her, things weren't going well. She was still jumping between her parents' house and friends' sofas after her welcome, and she was having trouble keeping a job. Occasionally, people I don't often communicate with would message me to let me know that she was seeking assistance from anyone who would listen. Some of them even implied that she hoped I would reconsider, that perhaps I would change my mind and end up playing dad to her child. However, that was not going to occur. I had already invested too much time and effort into rebuilding my life to consider taking that route. Her safety net was not going to be me. Just because things didn't go as she had hoped, I wasn't going to be the one to pick up the pieces. Nothing was going to pull me back into that chapter. I was finished. Ultimately, I believe I received the necessary closure. She was now coping with the repercussions of her decisions? And me? It was the first time since the day she departed that I felt completely, truly free. I had had enough of her looming over my life. I was happy that I had moved on. Not in a grand dramatic sense, but simply, contented. And what do you know? That was sufficient. From being kicked out at 14 for bad grades to building a six-figure business, my journey of overcoming adversity. I am a 27-year-old boy, and my parents kicked me out of the house because I received poor grades. Yes, you heard that correctly. Despite having lived in the United States for 2 generations, my parents have learned little from American parenting techniques. They have become preoccupied with my school grades, believing that good marks are the only way to live a successful life. To make matters worse, my older sister has always been an excellent student, resulting in continuous comparisons at home and at school. Things were considerably better in elementary school. My sister finished with an A+ and topped her class, whereas I only received an A, which sparked my parents' dismay. In middle school, the comparison game started. Following each exam, my parents would compare my grades to those of my sister from the previous year. The more they compared, the lower my grades became. My grades plummeted from A's to B's and C's, and my parents' rage increased with each drop. They attempted every type of punishment except physical torture. I was forced to kneel for hours without food or water, and I was starved the night before examinations to help me concentrate. A month before exams, they took away my video games, locked me up at home, and forbade me from going outdoors or eating any of my favorite meals. Whenever I requested something, they said, "Get good grades and you'll get it." I eventually stopped asking for anything. My parents own a modest grocery store and hail from economically disadvantaged backgrounds. My grandparents were immigrants who worked several jobs to make ends meet. My father had to leave school at a young age to support his family. My parents worked hard in their teens and 20s to save money and start the store. They believed that education was the only path out of poverty, despite the fact that we were not as impoverished as they claimed. It's the standard save for a rainy day attitude while hungry in the present. While I respect their efforts, they overdid it. They didn't realize that school grades weren't everything. Torturing me at such a young age was a recipe for disaster. I tried so hard to match my sister's grades, but I couldn't. I struggled at memorizing, unlike my sister, but I excelled at calculations. As their punishments became harsher, I grew more rebellious. I began skipping courses and adding jokes and song lyrics on my exam papers to irritate them. They grounded me, putting me in the basement with my books and not letting me go until I finished my lessons. I was not permitted to play outside on weekends or vacations, and my video games and comic books were taken. But I was a bright kid. When my parents went to work at the grocery store, I would sneak away and play for the entire day. When they learned I was sneaking away, they started taking me to the store on weekends and throughout summer vacations as punishment. However, this backfired, as I began to like it. I enjoyed talking with clients, assisting them in making product selections and managing the cash register. My folks were not delighted. They did not want me to run the grocery business, they wanted me to be a doctor or an engineer. Anything less was considered a dishonor to the family. One day, I casually said that I wanted to be a salesperson because I was good at closing deals. My folks were horrified. They believed that only ignorant people work in sales. Because they were spending so much money on my schooling, I was expected to pursue a respectable career, such as becoming a doctor or engineer. This tension persisted until I tested their limits by receiving a F in my freshman year of high school. My parents were devastated when they learned I would have to redo a year. They were finished with their customary punishments and reacted as if I had committed a crime. They had no choice but to hit me, but they refrained. Instead, they exposed me to severe verbal abuse and psychological suffering. They claimed I had brought dishonor on the family and could no longer live with them. They tossed me out of the house and commanded me not to return, even if I died from starvation or cold. I was devastated. Despite my rebellious inclination, I had never envisioned running away from home, and I was unprepared for this predicament. My parents didn't allow me to mingle much, so I had few friends to turn to for assistance. I was either confined at home or sent to the grocery store to help out. However, once my initial dread of living on the streets subsided, I experienced a startling sense of freedom. It was a huge relief to finally be able to accomplish what I wanted. My first night, I slept on a park bench. The next day, I headed downtown looking for a sales position. I knew I had an aptitude for selling, so I went from store to store, asking if there were any openings. After applying at over a dozen businesses, I got a position at a beauty shop. It wasn't simple because I lacked qualifications and prior experience, but the owner required someone immediately. He challenged me to sell a costly lipstick as an add-on to a customer who only wanted night cream. I managed to sell it, and the owner saw my potential. He was impressed by my ability to sell makeup to young women and employed me. The salary was poor, but he did offer me a place to sleep. As my sales increased, I requested a commission on each sale, and it was the beginning of my path to become a successful businesswoman. Ironically, my parents thought forcing me to work at their grocery shop was punishment, but it actually provided me with valuable real-world experience that would benefit me later in life. I wish they had recognized my potential and understood that practical experience is far more valuable than memorizing academic material. Following that, I bounced about jobs in search of higher salary. One business even offered to cover my college expenses, but I declined. I had something else in mind. At the age of 21, I founded my own company, which offers support and sales services to other small enterprises. My company closes deals for other product-based businesses, generating cash in exchange for large fees. We sell a wide range of things, including credit cards, insurance, cosmetics, and books. It did not expand immediately. It took over 5 years to stabilize. I began with simply 5 staff working for a single client, who sold mattresses and pillows. My organization now has 200 sales agents that assist over 50 companies in selling thousands of products. That's enough backstory. Here's the current issue. My mother has been monitoring me online. She recently began following me on Facebook and Instagram. My accounts are public, and she has been liking older posts and photos. I'm not sure if she's trying to draw attention to herself or if she's simply making mistakes while zooming in on my photographs. One thing is certain, they are fascinated by my lifestyle. They used to think I was a loser who couldn't do anything without decent marks, but today I earn 6 figures every month. My mother texted me a week ago, saying she missed me and wanted me to come home. I saw the message but did not reply. She has been pouring me with compliments about how proud she is of my accomplishments. She's now bugging me to come over. Regardless of how much I disregard her messages, I can't stop thinking about them and my childhood trauma. Part of me wants to go home and brag about my success in front of them, to let them feel the embarrassment they caused me. However, my partner believes that I should avoid them. And don't get caught in their emotional net. She believes they will eventually use guilt to extort money from me. What do you all think I should do? Update 1. Hello everyone? This is going to be hilarious. Despite my girlfriend's warnings not to meet my parents, a part of me wanted to brag about my accomplishment, so I went to their door. Dad wasn't home, but my mother and sister were waiting for me. Dad is still unaware of my achievement. He believes I'm generating money by scamming others and does not want to be affiliated with me. Mom apologized and said that I had to suffer because of Dad's old-school notions that good grades were the key to life. It was funny how she made Dad the scapegoat, despite the fact that she was also complicit in abusing me. I pointed out that she was really stricter in punishing me, but she dismissed it, claiming she was simply following Dad's directions as a good wife. When I tried to hold her accountable, she smiled and claimed it was all in the past, and we should go on and reconnect as a happy family. I inquired about my sister's life. She informed me that she has a master's degree in literature but is having difficulty finding work as a teacher due to poor communication and social skills. Despite knowing the cause for her terrible people skills, I pretended to be intrigued and asked her why her high academics weren't helping her get a job. She blamed our parents, claiming that she had spent her entire childhood confined in a room studying to impress them. She pushed herself to the limit and separated herself from everyone. I knew how lonely she was at school. She had few friends since Mom wouldn't let her mingle. Mom believed that white kids were terrible students and negative influences. Despite her hard work, my sister's lack of social skills is now limiting her professional prospects. Seeing her situation, I'm pleased I rebelled. Else, I'd have ended up like her. My parents attempted to isolate me as well, but I resisted. My sister joined me in condemning Mom's terrible parenting. Mom began sobbing and, once again, expertly deflected the blame to Dad. After we finished blaming her for our horrible childhood, I asked her why she had contacted me. She went on and on about how proud she was of my accomplishments, despite the fact that she had no idea what I did for a job. As I've previously stated, Asian parents define success as being a doctor, engineer, or having a high-paying position at a bank. They don't comprehend entrepreneurship. To them, running any business is the same as running a grocery store, which they despise. Sitting in that house reminded me of my upbringing, when my parents warned me I'd wind up on the streets as a loser. They even misled me into believing I was mentally ill since I couldn't get A+ grades. Oh, and I failed to mention that they sent me to a therapist because they believed I was having trouble focusing on my academics. After 2 or 3 sessions, the therapist chastised my parents for putting too much pressure on me, claiming I was a perfectly normal child with an average IQ for my age. My girlfriend bet that Mom invited me to ask for money. She lost the bet, and Mom did not ask for any money this time. However, her behavior indicates that the request will arrive shortly. Since then, Mom has been continually checking in on me. My girlfriend wagers $1 that whenever she receives a text, it will be about money. LOL, I've won every bet thus far because Mom hasn't inquired, but I suspect I'll lose soon. Mom has invited me to dinner this weekend. I understand she's attempting to present a rosy picture before asking for things. I just got a text from her saying she's arranging supper for me this weekend. I'll provide an update in my future post. I have to rush immediately. Goodbye. Update 2. Hello everyone, I got my sweet revenge on my folks. I don't think they'll ever call me again after this humiliation. In my last piece, I noted Mom's text invitation to supper. I said I was busy and couldn't make it. Yes, I was playing hard to get. Since she insisted, I questioned her why she was being so nice to me since Dad still suspected I was making money illegally. She stated that Dad was organizing the dinner as a way to make amends. She said Dad was proud of me and wanted to apologize in person. I inquired, "What do you mean by organizing? It's only the 4 of us, correct?" She responded, "No, we're inviting all the close friends and relatives living nearby." I answered, "Sure, I'll be there." I couldn't pass up this opportunity to confront my childhood pain. Mom asked me to dress nicely and arrive on time. My rebellious side kicked in. I arrived 2 hours late, dressed in my gym sweatshirt, trekking shorts, and cap. For an Asian parent, wearing shorts to a social gathering is equivalent to committing a crime. Mom called me repeatedly, but I didn't answer. I just texted a couple of times that I'd be late, with no reason or explanation. I'm sure that annoyed my folks. They have a habit of portraying themselves as excellent hosts. When guests came to our house, my parents would spend at least 2 days cleaning every area, making a list of foods to offer, and arranging everything in its proper place. Guests would be served on our finest china, and if they stayed, they'd sleep on the softest sheets and pillows. My parents would argue that it is part of our tradition to treat guests properly, but some of it was excessive for social acceptance. My parents had reserved seating on the restaurant's rooftop. When I came in such casual dress, I received quite a few stares. Because I make more than everybody else there, those looks were disguised with phony smiles of gratitude. My parents were obviously upset, but they did not show it. Instead, they hugged me and raised a toast, singing my praises. This was the first time Dad had held me, and it did not seem comforting. I felt resentful. The way they acted made me wonder whether I was the jerk for believing they were incorrect all along. But they were imposters. The hall was crowded, and for a while, I pondered discreetly eating dinner and leaving. But when they proceeded to tout my accomplishments as their own, I became outraged. They boasted about my accomplishments, belongings, and lifestyle, taking full credit for molding me into a good person. My outspoken aunt then questioned, "Didn't you guys throw him out of the house?" I laughed and applauded her bravery. My parents were embarrassed, but they soon covered it up, saying it was a way to bring me on the right track. And that their penalties were what helped me achieve in life. I lost it when they stated that. I sarcastically replied, "That's correct, everyone. I attribute my whole success to my poisonous parents. Do you know what the best decision they ever made for me was? I was kicked out of my house and forced to live on the streets." Yes, it is correct. You're so cocky today, stating you knew I'd be successful. It's funny because I recall another version. Didn't you say I would be a loser? A homeless drug addict? Worse, a criminal? I went on. Remember how you restrict me of family vacations as punishment for my grades? How did you lock me up at home for a week with little food? You confined me in the basement for hours without sufficient ventilation and ordered that I finish my education there. Yeah, you're correct. All of this was absolutely necessary to make me a better person. Perhaps everyone in this room should do the same for their child to help them succeed. You see, this is the secret sauce of success, you understand? It was such a monologue. I would say that the bitterness and pain that had been building up inside me for years had finally erupted. My mother tried to intervene, but I dismissed her and resumed my rant. My sister tried to calm me down by caressing my arms, but I was beyond their control. My parents were in tears, and they would have rather died than be embarrassed in front of the entire village. But I was less concerned about their reputation. Standing next to me, my sister was crying as well. Some of you may ask why I have a soft place for my sister since she has never stood up for me as an elder sibling. Well, I do not blame her. She was the same age as me, but a year older. My parents caused more harm to her than to me. At the very least, I was able to rebel, sneak out to play, and finally build a better life for myself. She, on the other hand, lost her spine by following our parents' orders. She never got to enjoy her childhood, and she now struggles with low confidence while living with them. I've offered her a position with my company, and she's even taken personality development seminars, but it hasn't helped much. I offered she start working for me to gain some soft skills, and then she could choose a job for herself. As for my parents, I have severed all connections with them. I warned Mom not to contact me again, and that I was just speaking to her to exact revenge for everything they had put me through. I've blocked her, but I plan to stay in touch with my sister. My sister patted me on the back for exposing our parents, saying it was the best vengeance I could have gotten. They don't care about money or anything else but their reputation as perfect parents in the neighborhood. Following the event, various family members and friends reached out to express their condolences for my troubles. I told them I was not searching for pity. I just wanted people to recognize that pressing a child for academics is more harmful than beneficial. My sister and I are living proof of poor parenting. Caught my pregnant wife on camera cuddling with a coworker. Now I'm questioning everything, including paternity. My wife, 38F, and I, 39M, have been together for 12 years. I don't know how to characterize it other than as the perfect connection. In 12 years, I believe we've only raised our voices at each other perhaps 2 or 3 times. We do everything together, But we've never had a problem letting each other live our own lives and pursue our own interests. We bought a house where we wanted, and we both had fantastic high-paying jobs with excellent work-life balance. Basically, it's been everything but perfect. We've been trying to become pregnant for 2 years and haven't been successful. We were preparing to begin fertility treatments when I returned home from a business trip, and guess what? She was pregnant. I got this strange notion. Wait, I thought we didn't try during the week last month because of fertility testing. But I couldn't remember exactly since we were so busy. So I assumed I had misremembered. Now, I frequently travel across the country for work. Other than during COVID, I've been on the road for up to 40 weeks per year. Since COVID, it has been reduced, but still more than a week every month for the past 4 to 5 years. My wife has become quite friendly with the guy she works with. Let us call him Matt. Matt is slightly younger, around 34 million. I know him. He is married, and I know his wife. They've been working together for around 7 years. He's always been around, and we've been friendly. Have I ever suspected something was going on? No. But I've always thought you'd be a fool to believe there's no chance your partner may leave the relationship. Maybe I'm naive, but I've always considered it as a safety not to take my wife, or any previous companion, for granted. She has never given me cause to believe she would do that, but anything is conceivable. I was out of state for work about a month ago, while she remained at home. I asked her what she had been doing earlier in the day, and she replied Matt was coming over for supper. This wasn't unusual. Matt stops by on occasion. Sometimes with his wife, sometimes alone, and occasionally when I'm not around. I didn't think much about it. We installed a security system with cameras inside and outside the house following an unrelated event a few years back. The cameras record footage, which she and I can view live. I frequently use those cameras to check on the dog while I, or both of us, are away, because the rest of the system is monitored by a business in case an alert goes out. She knows I check those cams. There's even an installed system that allows me to communicate with them. If any of us is out of town, I'll play pranks on them, and she will do the same. She travels for work, although far less than I do. The point is, it's known that I check them frequently when I'm not at home. So I switch on the camera and see my 4-month pregnant wife sleeping on her side on the floor, with Matt sitting on her leg and massaging her hips with a foam roller. Okay, what the _ is this? I begin rewinding through the footage and they are eating and talking regularly. But then they get on the couch and share the same blanket. They are now feet to feet, but that couch isn't that huge. Then they move to the floor, and I logged in. Anyway, I text her while I'm still monitoring the cameras. They both appear like deer in headlights, and he swiftly departs. We get into an argument. She isn't angry with me for accusing her, but she is adamant that nothing happened, or ever will happen, and that what I witnessed was innocent. She complained about being in agony from the pregnancy, which I know is real. She is already experiencing back pain and other symptoms. The most significant moment of the conversation was when I questioned her, if I were there, would you two have been comfortable doing any of that in front of me? She hesitantly said, no, probably not. I told her I didn't want to talk after that, but we'd discuss it when I returned home in 3 days. That's when it occurred to me. What if my strange gut feeling about her telling me she was finally pregnant was related to this? What if my 1% chance came true and we did not have this child? It's now eating away at me while I spend 3 days alone in a motel 1,000 miles away. I resolved with myself that I believe it is less likely than more likely that something between them occurred, but my 1% has now increased to 10%, 20%, or possibly more. When I arrive home, she's walking on eggshells and doesn't say it. I wait to see what she will do. 2 days later, she finally brings it up and collapses. She claims nothing happened and that she would never cheat. She doesn't go beyond to prove her innocence, which I viewed as a positive sign. Anyway, we resolve the issue and continue forward, at least for the time being. I'm still coping and figuring out how to trust her after all this time. I'm gradually realizing that they've been pals for a long time. Maybe he has intentions, but I don't think she does. I've spent a lot of time with both of them and have never noticed anything wrong. What is destroying me right now is the concept that if I am wrong and something happens, I will be able to deal with it. What if the child is not mine? I've never mentioned it in our disputes or the few lengthy discussions we've had about the problem, and she hasn't either. Mostly because I don't want to further the situation by crushing her, especially if she's telling the truth, which I mostly believe. The only option I can think of at this point is to wait until the baby is delivered and then order a paternity test in secret. Should I do this? Should I tell her and deal with the situation now? If you were a woman in her circumstances and told the truth, would it ruin you or your opinion of me? If I asked you if you were lying, how would you respond? I don't want to ask such a vague question, but what should I do? Mini update. There are a lot of comments. Thank you everyone. More than I can handle directly, but I'll continue reading. Some have made valid comments about tackling it now rather than later, which I am contemplating more than previously. Thank you to those that concentrated solely on my relationship. I understand, but that is not my main focus right now. We've been discussing it a lot. My wife and I are fairly open with each other. I'm not saying I believe nothing happened, but I'm more concerned with paternity right now. If I need to track or spy on my wife using Life 360, then this relationship is gone. That is not the connection we have, nor is it one that I want or believe anyone should have. We are working to rebuild trust. As I said in this lengthy essay, my 1% suspicion increased to 10% or so. Trust me, I take my relationship seriously, but if the child isn't mine, there's no use in continuing the talk. I have previously addressed this with my lawyer. I don't live in a state where the birth certificate issue would be a problem. If I have documentation proving the child is not mine, divorce will be less of an issue. We are both in independent financial situations, so it will not matter much. I'll keep updating this page as long as possible and offer an update when and if anything is fixed. Update 1, May 10, 2024. She was out of the state on a work trip until late last night. It is Friday, and she is working from home in our kitchen today. I asked to speak and brought it up, requesting a paternity test. She quickly responded yes, without hesitation. She stated unequivocally that she has no reason to be concerned. She has no trouble taking the test right now. The one condition I left was that if it is at all intrusive, according to our doctors, I am fine with waiting till it is low risk. I'm not a doctor, and I have no idea what they'd have to do to test now, so we'll see. But she is aware, and we are receiving one. It was a decent and lengthy talk. We're currently sitting together for lunch. She has no idea I did this on here, therefore the new account because she is on here somewhere. Thanks to everybody for your assistance and opinions. A lot of you reminded me that we are already very open about everything, and if nothing happened, she wouldn't be concerned about getting a test. I was more concerned about her health and adding an absurd level of stress if there was a problem, given she is in a high-risk pregnancy and it has taken us so long to become pregnant. So again, thank you for your assistance. I suppose I could update whether the child is mine or not, but I'm not sure how long it will take. I am 90 to 95% certain the baby is mine, but this will help us continue the conversation. Update 2, because it appears to be a more relevant topic in this post than in the other, I do have the film. No, I have not spoken to Matt yet. He's informed her he wants to discuss it, but I've ordered them to wait. My relationship with my wife, as well as the paternity test, are currently the most important things. I will ultimately speak with Matt. No, I am not going to purposefully entangle Matt's wife. I don't see why I would, except to be vindictive. I won't cover for him, of course, but his relationship is his, and mine is mine. I'm not interested in making things worse. Whatever happens between him and his wife is none of my business. We've had a lengthy discussion about why my wife believed she could be intimate with someone else. Nothing is being neglected. I could write an essay about our history, her motivations, and my thoughts about it, but instead I'll simply state that I'm aware of it. She denies any more wrongdoing, but concedes it was not a good appearance. She was not thinking about it at the moment, and that is what we are currently dealing with. When asked if it appeared harmless and if my wife visited Matt's house when his wife was not present, I said that she was 4 months pregnant and I was at home. We've been so busy with work that the days have blended together. Trust me, we are quite open people who are at ease with themselves and one other. I'm not sure if she's been to his place without his wife. I mean, the 3 or 4 of us maybe only hang around once or twice a month, but they work directly together every day and have for years. So, obviously there is some closeness there. They are both in senior executive positions at their organization. I too have long-term female friends with whom I have traveled, had dinner, and hung out in hotel rooms, but I have never crossed any lines since it is not who I am. I'm married, and I adore my wife and life. I see no reason to do anything inappropriate. So yeah, the optics are awful, but I need to determine whether it's just lousy optics or anything else. Matt may have motives, but I'm not sure. That's the thing I need to figure out, if I trust her to handle it. She claims she has never been aware of Matt's intentions. She spends almost the same amount of time with him and his wife as he does with us. She works in a building nearby, while I reside on the coast while my company is headquartered in Chicago, so my coworker buddies are considerably more dispersed. We can't simply grab after-work beverages as others can. Because of this, I frequently attend her work hangouts rather than my own. I'm also acquainted with her CEO, so while it's not ideal, I've always trusted her. I've never had a reason not to, until now. This is the first fracture or ding in our 15-year-old trust. To clarify what happened that day, my wife said something to Matt, who froze. He murmured something I didn't hear and she added, "No, don't worry about it." He put something in the dishwasher and she let him out the front door. He did not jump out the window or anything. I'm not going to include every single nuance or detail in this post because it would take hours to write, and I'm not uploading security tape for strangers to see. I installed the security system after an event involving a stranger on the internet. I'm not suggesting nothing transpired between them, rather I'm not sure. That is what my wife and I talk about practically every day, and what we are going through. The original point of this post was that we had not discussed paternity. I didn't want to place her in a situation where she would lose the child, whether mine or not. Not only was I unable to describe every delicate detail, but I also included incorrect details about our life that had nothing to do with what happened. I used to be a minor public figure and some internet troll came across the country to threaten us with death. It grew to the point where the federal government had to intervene. People here are jumping to conclusions with far less knowledge than I do, and they are ignoring the original premise of the post and the questions I posed. Some inquired if I had informed Matt's wife. No, I have not. She is my wife's friend, but we don't spend much time together. I know her through my wife and I only see her every few months, at a bar after work or when they come over for dinner or to hang out. We are not best buddies. Should I actually go tell her, "Hey, your husband was at my place"? I knew he was there because I observed him apply a foam roller to my wife's hips while sitting on her feet. It's pretty apparent there, ___, and I'm not sure, but she might be carrying his baby. This is not a soap opera. I have nothing to tell her, so why would she believe me based on the scant facts I have? And why or how does that help my situation? If all of this is incorrect, then I've ruined my relationship by acting like a child and inciting drama for what appears to be vindictive reasons. Plus, I would place them in the same scenario as we are now, for something I don't even know is true. I believe you have completely lost the plot here. Update 3, August 21st, 2024. Hello everyone, here's your next update. I also included this in the recent update. This is where we are at. Yes, my wife is still extremely pregnant. She is at the hard to pick things up off the floor stage. She's due in 8 weeks, but it's actually 6 weeks. I simply looked at the calendar. We are currently having weekly ultrasounds. The youngster already weighs approximately 5 pounds and has a large head. Her and I had very lengthy, direct chats about everything. She is convinced that nothing has ever happened and never will. For a long time, she was furious with herself for triggering this and my doubts. I've done my best to correct this, because I need to keep the stress off her as much as possible right now. But it will definitely be reviewed after the birth. As I've stated throughout, my only concern is the child and the successful birth. Okay, mostly. Perhaps not only asterisk. The only thing we still disagree on is that I believe he was getting too close because he had developed feelings or was receiving attention that he wasn't getting elsewhere. She doesn't see it that way, but she has admitted that it is feasible, even if she was unaware of it. When I told her I wanted a paternity test, she readily consented, stating it was no problem at all. My only caveat was that it not be medically risky or stressful, as she is in a high-risk pregnancy. We both discussed it with our doctors, and they basically told us that our only option was to go to court since they wouldn't do one without the law involved, which we both thought was crazy. Her doctor was confused by it, so I didn't press too hard. To be honest, she pretty much demanded the test. I knew there were other alternatives, and I researched them, but I ultimately decided to wait until the birth. I already have a lab set up and ready for the test. I'm 95% confident it's unneeded, but I'm getting one for my own peace of mind and, most importantly, to ensure that nothing comes between me and my child. Thank you to everyone who has sent me supportive messages that I have not responded to. I'm going to go through them tonight before I leave again. For those of you who believe I should be acting like a 17-year-old high school student, either by being aggressive or purposefully cheating on my wife to illustrate a point, or implying other childish behavior, thank you for the entertainment. Stop watching TLC or TikTok. That idiotic drama isn't the way to go, kids. And to the one individual who recommended I provoke an accident with my wife, I hope you wind yourself in prison someday. It's quite unlikely that I'll return here after tonight, at least until I receive the test findings. If you're still interested in the results, check back in 1.5 to 2 months. I've been advised that the findings take roughly 48 hours after submission. I'll give you your moment then. After my dad died, my mom threw out all of his belongings to make room for her partner and forced me out, saying she didn't want filth from the past. My father died 3 weeks ago, following a protracted illness. He had been diagnosed with multiple sclerosis a few years back. He fought valiantly, but he soon became unable to continue, and we lost him. It was a great emotional blow for me because I was much closer to my father than to my mother. I, 18M, had no idea how to feel, and I was just starting to deal with my sadness when my mother decided to toss me out of the house so she could move in with her boyfriend. Within 1 week, I lost my father and discovered that my mother had been having an affair with a coworker all along. I'm not sure if my father knew about it, but it doesn't make a difference. I was outraged when she brought home her boyfriend just 4 days after my father died, and we had a heated argument after he left. She told me that this romance had been going on for a long time, basically since my father was diagnosed. She stated I had no idea how tough it was for her to have a sick partner, and so I had no right to blame her for finding love elsewhere. She also stated that she was aware that she would eventually lose her spouse, therefore she saw nothing wrong with what she was doing. I informed her that what she did was extremely pathetic. She told me I had to leave, so I paid for it the next day. She didn't want any filth from the past in her home anymore, and she wasn't just talking about me. She and her boyfriend had begun moving a lot of belongings from my father's room in the morning. By the time I awoke, there were crates in the front yard. My mother informed me that I could either take the boxes with me or burn them. Either way, they were all leaving her house. They gave me a few hours to gather my belongings and depart. I opted to spend my time packing my possessions rather than disputing with them. My mother's actions suggested she was too far gone, and I didn't want to sacrifice my dignity by speaking to her. We had pretty well stopped getting along a few months before my father died because she was constantly fighting with him. I didn't believe it was proper to dispute trivial matters and be so mean to him, especially because we knew he wasn't going to make it. After learning of the affair, I lost all respect for her, therefore I was relieved to be going. I made a few phone calls, and after a while, my girlfriend said she could speak with her parents and allow me to stay with them for a few weeks until I could get back on my feet and make other plans. I am quite appreciative of that. I've been living with them since my mother booted me out, and they've been quite nice, particularly my girlfriend. We've just been dating for 3 months, and she didn't need to do this, but I'm grateful to her. On the day I left, I grabbed the boxes that my mother had thrown away, which included my father's stuff, as well as my own. I figured I couldn't let them burn since that would mean losing the remainder of what my father left behind. This made my room really cramped due to all of the items, but it was worth it. For the past few days I'd avoided even glancing at those crates, let alone rummaging through them. The reason was simple: it reminded me too much of my father, and I was not prepared to confront it. I knew I'd end up bawling on the floor since I already missed him so much. So I'd been avoiding it like the plague. However, 2 days ago, I made the decision to go through some of the boxes, regardless of how difficult it was. I was extremely lucky because the first box I chose was full of documents and documentation from my father's room, from before he was taken to the hospital in his final weeks of life. He had been working from his room in the house because he was in no fit to go out every day. My father worked as a tax consultant for a large corporation, so there was a lot of paperwork involved. I didn't comprehend much of it, so I put it aside. I got to the bottom of the box and found a blue manila file with my name on it. That was it. What I discovered there is going to finish my mother, and I'm here for it. Going through the contents of that folder, I learned that my father had really left a will, which my mother was presumably unaware of, or perhaps she did and was just not telling the lawyer. Not only did I uncover the will, but also several additional documents, including the house deed. It found out that the house did not belong to both of my parents, but rather to my father. After reading the will, I learned that my father had left the house and all of the money in his account to me. My mother had only received his car, which was still a huge deal because my father drove a lovely automobile, and she had taken ownership of their holiday property. I recognized my mother had no right to kick me out of the house because it did not belong to her, now or at any moment. It was originally my father's, and it is now mine. So far, my father's lawyer had informed me that his assets would be frozen until the court determined how they would be distributed. However, as soon as I discovered those documents, I called him and informed him of my findings. I invited him to my girlfriend's house and asked if I may move back into my own house, as my father's will clearly specified that the house belonged to me, not my mother. He affirmed that I was free to do so if I wanted, and that my mother had no authority to kick me out without appropriate notice. That was everything I needed to know. The lawyer would manage the will's execution, but I planned to address the problem with my mother. I called her right away and informed her I'd found my father's will. He had indicated that he would leave me the house and all of the money in his bank account. She remained silent for a few minutes before saying it didn't matter to her. But now that the tables had been turned, I asked her to leave the premises. The house never belonged to her, and she had done nothing to deserve it. She'd been nasty to my father and now she was being horrible to me. I informed her that I wanted her out by the end of the week. That's when she began groveling. To be honest, I anticipated her to argue with me because that is how she has always been, argumentative and unpleasant to everyone around her. Instead, she begged me not to say or do anything because she had convinced her partner to move in by promising to handle everything. Apparently, her co-worker was married but had recently filed for divorce, and his ex-wife was demanding a large sum of alimony, which was understandable given that he cheated. He was concerned about it, and my mother promised him that she would manage everything for him. This meant allowing him to live with her so he didn't have to worry about housing or rent and could concentrate on his divorce. If I approached them and stated that the house did not even belong to her, she would be screwed. So if I talked to her boyfriend, she would not only be homeless, but also alone. I'm not a cruel person, so I told my mother she could keep behaving as if she had the means to help her partner, but I didn't want her to live in my house anymore. I vowed not to say anything about what she had told me as long as she agreed to leave the house by the end of the week. I didn't care where she went. All I needed was for her to leave so I could return to my home. Then she started telling me it wasn't fair, it was blackmail, and I couldn't do this to her. I reminded her of how cruelly she had treated me just a few days before, so it was absurd that she wanted me to consider her circumstances now. I did not believe I was being unjust. After disagreeing with me for a while, she began crying on the phone, saying she couldn't believe I was treating her like this simply because she wanted to be happy in her life for once. She claimed she didn't want to marry my father, but she was already pregnant with me and her family had pushed her to. She claimed my father had never treated her properly, had always been preoccupied with his work, and had never made enough time for her. She was only trying to have a good life with her partner, and the only reason she kicked me out was because she knew I was like my father. I wouldn't stand in the way of her happiness. She stated that my actions were proving her point. I didn't know what to say at this point, so I told her she had 1 week and hung up. Since then, I've been feeling rather guilty. I'm not sure why, but hearing her cry over the phone made me feel horrible. I'm not sure if this is because I'm doing anything wrong, or if it's simply because I'm a sensitive person who can't bear hearing people cry. I'm bewildered, so I'm here to ask, AITA, why did you tell my mother and her boyfriend they had 1 week to vacate the house? Edit. I don't have any family in this state, so I had to rely on my friends for aid. I've spoken with my grandparents because I'll be attending college in a few months and will need their support to handle expenditures. After describing the issue to them, they severed relations with my mother. She's probably not worse off for it, because she never got along with her own parents and only had a cordial relationship with her in-laws. Regarding the will, I'm not sure why my father left the house and all of his money to me, or why he hadn't discussed it with his lawyer. I did ask my father's lawyer about it and he revealed that he had been urging my father to prepare a will since he was diagnosed, but my father kept claiming he would do it later. Now, it appears that he left behind a holographic will because there were no witnesses or lawyers involved, which may make it simpler for my mother to fight it. We'll deal with it as it arises. Fortunately, in our state, even such wills are regarded as genuine, and I'm thinking my father was aware of this. As for why he left the most essential stuff to me, I'm guessing it's because he presumably drafted this document while at home, and my mother had been arguing with him over nothing in particular. She was only arguing with him because she could, and he couldn't just leave her, no matter how upset he was. I suppose that is why he took this decision, and to be honest, I believe it was a good one. To address your questions, I don't know my father's specific motives, but here is my theory. Update 1. Hello, I am still living with my partner, and after reading the comments, I have decided to rethink my decision. I will continue to insist that my mother leave the house, but I have chosen to modify the terms of my agreement. After I posted the last update, many of you urged that I consider the possibility that my mother will fight the will, which would cause me a lot of grief. I thought about it, and you were correct. I didn't think about it at first, so I called my mother back. I informed her that I was now willing to give her 6 months to locate a place and move out of the house. She looked astonished when I mentioned it because we hadn't spoken since our last conversation. She didn't have an explanation for her change of heart, but I did tell her that since I was giving her 6 months, she needed to swear not to fight my father's will. Hopefully, 6 months would be enough time to verify the legality of the will in court, and then we could begin dividing the assets. I suppose 6 months would also allow my mother's boyfriend enough time to finalize his divorce. Personally, I would have liked to generate a lot of hardship for my mother and ask her to leave within a week, making sure she felt as bad as I did. But hey, I need to. Right now, it's more vital for me not to act rashly because that will only lead to difficulties for me rather than her. She stated she would think about it before agreeing to anything, so we'll see what she says. Update 2. Hello. 3 days ago I told my mother that if she promised not to fight the will, I would let her stay in the house for another 6 months. I was leaving for college in 3 months anyhow, so I assumed I'd ask my grandparents to send me money so I could buy an apartment. I did not want to burden my fiancée by staying with her for so long, but her parents insisted that I do so. My girlfriend and I have only been together for 3 months, but we genuinely love each other, so she said the same thing. With my living arrangement fixed, I wasn't in a hurry to have my mother leave the house because it didn't make sense. I hoped my mother would agree to my demands so that I could have my father's lawyer sign off on them. If she signed a legal contract, she wouldn't be able to back out. I was expecting to hear from her with good news, but instead she called me today and asked if I expected her to sign any paperwork or contracts for our agreement. I instantly replied yes, since I did not want to mislead her. And to be honest, I did not trust her. This was a given. She paused for a few seconds before telling me that she was not interested in signing a contract. That annoyed me because it implied that if she knew she had to stick to it or face the repercussions, she was hesitant to make any promises. I was upfront with her, telling her that if she wasn't willing to sign a legal agreement, my offer was off the table. I told her I didn't trust her at all, and she shouldn't be shocked considering her recent behavior towards me, which has been nothing short of nasty. I expected her to disagree, but she told me she agreed, though she also didn't trust me, insisting that I was unquestionably my father's kid. I had no idea what that had to do with anything, because neither my father nor I had ever done anything that could be considered untrustworthy. The only thing she had against my father was that she had been forced to marry him because she became pregnant with me, and my grandparents decided it was best to proceed with the marriage. That is not my fault, nor is it my father's fault. If she didn't want to marry him, she should have stood up for her rights. Besides, I am not even sure how true her narrative is. I asked my grandparents about it, and they stated they hadn't really pressured her. But they had only encouraged her not to raise me on her own because she was so young at the time, and my parents appeared to be in love. Both of my grandparents suggested they marry, but there was no pressure on them. The other issue my mother faced with my father was that he worked too much. I don't believe that's a major issue because, of course, he had to work. My mother didn't work for the first few years of their marriage and finally started working about 7 years ago. She obtained the position since one of her friends and her friend's spouse founded the company. Otherwise, she would not have found the position she currently brags about. She claims to be an independent lady, but that is only because my father has always supported her. She had no right to say she didn't trust me because I'm my father's son. I was annoyed, so I told her she could do anything she wanted, but because she refused to sign a contract, I wanted her out of the house. I hung up before she could say anything. She tried phoning me numerous times after that, but I was too annoyed to speak with her. She hasn't called in the last half hour, but I'm confident she will. I will only talk to her after I've calmed down. Update 3. My mother did not call me again following our last talk, as I described in my previous report. I waited for her to call for the next 2 days, but she just did today. I was nervous because I wasn't sure what to anticipate. To be honest, on the one hand, I genuinely wanted her to agree to the deal I proposed, in which I let her reside in the house for 6 months until she could make alternative arrangements, in exchange for her not contesting the will. I thought I was being fair, but after our last disagreement I wasn't sure she would agree. When she called today I tried to be kind and civil because this wasn't just about her. I also had something to lose. I was expecting positive news, but as soon as I picked up, she informed me that she had made her decision. She opted not to sign any contracts. Instead, she was determined to fight the will, and she had even consulted with a lawyer about it. I was taken aback because this obviously meant she would no longer be residing in the house, which belonged to me. I told her that if she contests the will, she will no longer be able to live in my house. I hoped that would bring her back to her senses, but she said I had no authority to kick her out because the will had not yet been ratified. She had a point, but she also had no authority to kick me out because we were in a bit of a gray area right now. I told her we'd probably have to live together until the probate was completed. That concept clearly made her uncomfortable, and after a few seconds, she informed me she'd look for a place to live, but she'd take her time because I had no right to tell her what she should do. I assured her again that she could take as much time as she wanted, but that I would be back by the end of the week. She began ranting, accusing me of being a bother and claiming she had done nothing to deserve the harassment I was subjecting her to. I almost laughed because her claim that I was bothering her was the biggest joke of the century. She kept attempting to rant, but I hung up because we had nothing else to talk about. She'd made her decision and I didn't think I could change it anymore. I'm going to do what I believe is right and she can't stop me. Her partner, who is going through his own divorce, will not be much assistance to her either. I, on the other hand, have my family, girlfriend, and friends on my side. In fact, I believe I will tell her boyfriend the truth about my mother because I have been withholding information for far too long. Since she has made up her mind, I have decided to be an inconvenience, and there is no reason to keep this a secret any longer. Update 4. I did it. I informed my mother's lover the truth about the situation at the house. I don't think he had any notion until recently, which is strange considering he lived with my mother. This is a major deal to keep from your boyfriend, especially since she was still in contact with me, and I'm sure he would have asked about it. But I assume she's pretty adept at keeping secrets. After all, she hid her affair for a few years. It was not difficult to reach him. I just searched him up on Facebook and sent him a message containing proof. I also explained why I was telling him the truth now and not earlier, because I had been negotiating with my mother. But since she had made it apparent that she was not interested, I believed he had a right to know the truth. I sent the message 2 days ago and I finally heard from my mother today. I was expecting an eruption, but I didn't realize it would come so late. Anyway, she tried contacting me this morning, but I blocked her out of frustration. I've also blocked her on social media. When she ran out of other ways to contact me, she set up a fake email account and sent me a message from that address. In the email, she said that I should be pleased now because I had caused so much drama between her and her boyfriend for no reason. She claimed he had decided to leave her and return to his wife to attempt to work things out, blaming her for the entire situation, which, to be honest, he was correct about. I'm not really sure what she's furious about. The message was lengthy, and it contained warnings that she would make sure I paid a high price for this. All I could think was, she can bring it on. Truth be told, she no longer scares me. I've already lost all I could lose, and there's only one direction to go. Up. So, I'm looking forward to the court case. Update 5. Hello guys. I haven't kept you updated on what's been going on in my life over the last year, and I believe it's time I did. As I previously stated, I was looking forward to the court process, and my mother did end up fighting the will. The case got to court, and my father's attorney and I fought as hard as we could. Long story short, after 8 months, we eventually received a favorable ruling. The will was validated and upheld. This happened 2 months ago, and I'm still really pleased with it. My mother had to give up the house, and we no longer communicate with her. I have no idea what she is up to, but I am delighted she received her karma. Even her own parents have stopped communicating with her, so I'm pretty sure she's not living a joyful life right now. My neighbors told me that on the day she moved out, her boyfriend came to help her. So I'm betting they're back together, because no self-respecting lady would return to a man who had cheated on her. I'm very sure his wife rejected him, so he crawled back to my mother to make things right, and she gratefully accepted him back. Honestly, I'm pleased they're together. They deserve each other. I'm confident my father is beaming down at me from heaven because I've demonstrated resilience, strength, and a willingness to stand up for what is right. I'm in college now, set to begin my 2nd year. My grandparents are currently supporting me financially, and they will continue to do so until I find work, for which I'm glad. I know many of you are intrigued about my relationship. She also attends college, and we meet on weekends. In fact, we're arranging a little break for just the 2 of us this weekend. We are still going strong and are really serious about each other. Life is currently serene, and I am grateful to be at this point. Getting here was the most difficult part. After that, everything else felt easy. My daughter asked me to meet my granddaughter after 17 years. Am I the asshole for saying don't care for her or her daughter and to never contact me again? Original post, June 28, 2024. I am not sure if I'm an going to provide some background. I am in my 60s now. I was married to my ex-wife, and we had a daughter. Our marriage was going through its ups and downs, but I was really close with our daughter. But as our marriage was going through its difficulties, I made a huge mistake I still regret to this day. I started having an affair with my coworker. She was in a violent, physically abusive relationship at home. We became friends at work, and things just escalated from there. She got an out from me, she got the support she needed to file for divorce from her husband, who is currently in jail now. The affair went nowhere and we called it off shortly after, but I was glad that she got out of her abusive relationship and that she was safe. But when my ex-wife found out about the affair, things didn't go well. She lashed out and said a lot of horrible things about me to our daughter, who was 15 at the time. I admitted full fault with the affair, but even after the divorce, I sensed that the distance between me and my daughter was growing, until one day, My daughter said she wasn't going to speak with me anymore, and she was going to cut me off from her life forever. That was the most painful thing anyone had ever said to me. I begged her to please reconsider. I still remember that day. But time passed on. My daughter kept her word, and after trying to connect with her for the first year, I gave up. I found out from one of my mutual friends that my ex-wife married a great guy. I was happy because I was hoping that would remove the hatred from my ex-wife, and my ex-wife would advise our daughter to at least rekindle a relationship with me. But that never happened. I moved states a year later. I am at peace now, but still have some aching sadness. I have retired. Both my parents have passed away. My brother passed away tragically a couple of years ago. To be honest, I am waiting for my turn. I have only my dog and my sister left. A couple of hours ago, my daughter called me on my phone. I haven't spoken to her in 17 years. I instantly recognized her voice, but I didn't feel anything. No happiness, no sadness, just indifference. She was crying a lot on the call, and we caught up on life. She's married, and she has a daughter who's now 12. She apologized for cutting off contact, and she says her mom asked her to reconnect with me, as her mom felt guilty about how everything played out. She said she really wanted me to meet her daughter, and her daughter was constantly asking about granddaddy. But I wasn't feeling anything. After we caught up on everything in our life, I told her I don't care about her or her daughter, and to never contact me again. I then hung up. Was I the AH? AITA has no consensus spot. OOP received the majority of YTAs, with few others. Comments: Tidy Nuggets. This is one of the most obvious YTA posts I've seen here, good fucking lord. Top palpitation 4681. Well, it's already been said, but you're the asshole. AFSpouse 123, YTA. I hate when adults make very bad adult decisions that affect their children and then blame the children when they respond in a very childlike manner. Your daughter was a teenager. That is a rough time for kids even when their home life is stable. You gave her one whole year before you cut bait and gave up on her. Then you moved away. You told your daughter that she wasn't important enough to fight for, and she believed you. Now that she is an adult with a child of her own, she has reached out to you and you again told her she wasn't important to you. She now knows she was probably right to cut you out the first time. OOP updated the next day. Same post, June 29, 2024. Update. Look, I was extremely drunk last night. The words which came out of my mouth weren't the best, and my comments on my post weren't great either. Seeing how everyone said I was the AH, I decided to call my daughter again an hour ago. I didn't really expect her to pick up the call, but she picked up immediately. I apologized last night, and she said there was no need to apologize. I then sent her a link to this Reddit post on messages, and told her I know I was the AH, and thousands said so. She again said I wasn't the AH. She started crying again. I told her she's free to come to my house anytime the next 4 months, because after that I will be leaving the country with my sister and our dog. Our parents left us a nice farmhouse in their home country, and we will be spending the rest of our lives there. I sent her my address and messages, and my daughter said she'd come with her husband and her daughter by the end of next week. She asked if she was welcome to stay there for multiple days, and I told her she could stay for however long she wanted, as our house was spacious enough. Update 2. I have moved to the farmland, and am looking forward to spending the rest of my life here with my dog and my sister. It is peaceful and scenic. My daughter did come by to visit me with her husband and her daughter before I left the country. It was really nice seeing my granddaughter, who looked a lot like her mom. They stayed over at our place for a week, and we had a good time. However, it got a little sad when I told my daughter in private I had no interest in being a grandfather, and just didn't have strong emotions for it. I think those words really stung her, and my daughter did cry a lot after I said those words. My daughter wanted to rekindle our relationship, but it's just too late now. I told my daughter she's free to visit me in the farmland anytime she wants and the house is always open, but I doubt she'll be visiting anytime soon. The week she stayed over at my place before I left the country was a final goodbye for us. She has my number, but she hasn't called or texted since she left, and I haven't called or texted her either. That's the update for the many interested. This will probably be my only update. Comments. Commenter 1. I'm definitely about to be an outlier here based on these comments, and I'm going to stick to it. Based on the original post from 81 days ago, where not surprisingly most people called you TA, not only are you TA, you're a deadbeat selfish father and a cheater. You made your bed, you had a child and then cheated on your wife. You then blamed that child for your disgusting betrayal. And this is about to be odd after calling you TA, but I am proud that you decided to speak up and tell the truth. No child deserves to have a father who loves her so little, blames her for his mistakes, and now refuses to see her or his granddaughter because of his mistakes. Thank you for at least being honest that you are a terrible human being and not wasting her time. My wife left me for her rich lover, but when he lost it all, she came crawling back asking for a second chance. I am 32 years old, and I have been married to my wife, who is 27, for over 6 years. We've been together for 8 years and 3 months and have lived together for 7 years. In my opinion, everything was always excellent. I felt like we were the ideal relationship. We both have decent careers, secure money, and purchased a home 5 years ago. In February 2022, I tragically lost my mother to a heart attack. The months that followed were extremely difficult for both myself and my wife, who was close to my mother. By harsh, I mean truly rough. We hardly went out twice throughout that time, spending most nights at home relaxing on the couch and watching TV. I wasn't happy, but I assumed we'd get through it. Then D-Day arrived 5 weeks ago. My wife went out drinking with 3 male coworkers, only 5 minutes away from our house. I was okay with it, thinking, cool, but I'm going to bed soon. Around 3:30 a.m., she arrived home with those 3 guys. I knew them all. She then informed me that she was going out with them to the city. I disliked it, but I couldn't stop her. Everything closes at 4 a.m., yet despite the 15-minute travel home, she didn't arrive until 5:30. That was when my suspicions began, despite the fact that I had never mistrusted her before. 4 weeks ago she departed for an entire Sunday, claiming she was going to a carnival with her mother. I didn't trust it but had no idea what to do. She even left without saying goodbye while I was showering. She arrived home later that day, weeping. My initial answer was, "Honey, come here. What happened? What's made you so upset?" Her first words were, "I want a divorce." Following that, we had an emotional conversation. I asked her straight up whether she had cheated and she answered no. She told me she was unhappy for a long time and wanted a divorce. She had never informed me anything was wrong with our relationship, so this really surprised me. After our conversation, she left and moved in with her mother. 4 days later, I met her again since we have a puppy that neither of us can care for on our own, especially at her mother's house, so the dog is currently staying with an aunt. When we met again, I confronted her about infidelity. This time she admitted it. She said that she had cheated on me from the night she went drinking until a week later, when she left home. She stated that she believed she was in love with him. When I asked her what she liked best about him, she simply answered, "We have a good connection, a spark." That was it, I suppose. She also stated that she was experiencing a midlife crisis and was unsure about her life goals. In my perspective, she's going insane. She unexpectedly colored her hair purple and joined up for motorbike training. I attempted to reconcile with her during the first week or 2 of her departure, but she refused to budge. Every significant message I sent her was ignored. She did respond to light ones, but her responses were brief and arrogant. I really don't recognize my wife anymore. Her personality appeared to transform in just 1 week. She treats me as if I never existed in her life, as if I were a piece of junk. Is this a protective strategy to make things easier for her by pushing her issues into the future? Has she truly changed and feels this way now? How on earth is that possible? I mean, I get that falling in love is a fantastic experience, but what will happen to her after a few months when the honeymoon period with this guy is gone and she wakes up from it all? I've had a lot of conflicting sentiments. I resent her for cheating on me, and I'm incredibly disappointed. But I also see and understand that the foundation of our marriage has always been strong. 5 weeks have passed since D-Day. She still hasn't filed for divorce and neither have I. I'm not sure, but I believe she's still seeing the person she cheated on me with. To be honest, I am split between saving our marriage and ending it. Right now, I don't care if we get back together or divorce. I honestly do not know what to do. If I file for divorce now, I might regret it later for being too quick, but I also can't keep living in this state of limbo, still legally married, but she's already gone. Edit. For the first 4 days after she departed, I was unsure if she had cheated on me or not. Those were the toughest days because I felt so horrible and as if I had messed up everything. But as she admitted to cheating, those sentiments began to vanish. Even if I share responsibility for some aspects of our divorce, it is entirely her fault. She never showed me she was unhappy. She appeared pleased, as if she could have been an actress. She never mentioned being dissatisfied or what needed to change. To top it all off, she has cheated and continues to do so. This is finished. I no longer feel there is a way out of this. Also, I don't miss her right now. Sure, I miss who we were as a couple, but who is she now? Honestly, I almost feel sorry for the next guy whose heart she's bound to shatter. To be honest, I'm doing really well after my mother died. Of course, I had other issues at the time, but I was finally getting out of the funk and climbing back up. I wanted to go outside, drink, have fun, ride my motorcycle, etc. But then she cheated and kicked me back into the ravine. It will be alright in time, but I have to say that I am not looking forward to the holidays. No mother, no wife, and my father is alone after 40 years of marriage. But we will deal with it. Life carries on. Fortunately, I have a wonderful sister and a close circle of friends who I have known for over 20 years. I'm not ready to return to single life, but I am also a little excited. I haven't dated in almost 8 years, and I haven't gone out without first checking in with my partner. Of course, I fell as deeply as possible this year, but I'm confident that there will be better days ahead. One of the Redditors was completely correct about us marrying too young. When we married, I was 26 and she was 21. I haven't changed much in those years, but it's possible that she has changed much and has hidden those feelings for quite some time. Note, she stated that she is experiencing a midlife crisis. Those are her words, not mine. To go deeper into our common interests, hobbies, characteristics, and so on, I merely indicated in the post that we lived a stable life. I didn't go into depth since I didn't believe it would matter very much, and the post is already pretty lengthy. But here we go, hobbies and interests. We both enjoy gaming, although we have never played together. I'm now playing Age of Empires 4 on my PC, while she prefers to play The Witcher on her PlayStation 4. We both enjoyed watching a good Netflix show, especially after my mother died. We did it frequently, but even before that, we preferred staying in together to watch a nice movie rather than going out drinking. We would occasionally go to the movies or play pool, maybe once or twice a month. We also went out to dinner. We both liked motorcycles. I had a license and a bike, whereas she didn't. She always enjoyed sitting in the back seat of the bike as a passenger. When she was younger, her father would take her for rides on his bike. Apparently, she wants her own license and bike, something I was unaware of. Family time. We both enjoyed spending time with our family. We'd usually spend every other Sunday at her mother's house, with her stepfather, her father's house, with her stepmother, or my father's house. We enjoyed driving to nature sites and forests, as well as going for walks with our dogs. Personality traits. I enjoyed how spontaneous she could be. Well, she appears to be too impetuous, but that's okay. I sometimes overthink things, such as whether we should buy something, whether we actually enjoy it, how much money we have at the time, and so on. She would simply buy it or book the vacation I was apprehensive about. I admire that about her. I realize we were diametrically opposed in this regard. I adored her sense of humor. We had, or have, an incredible connection when it comes to humor. We had the exact same dry, goofy sense of humor and always had a good time together. I always admired her honesty and straightforwardness, until things went wrong. She was continuously telling me how she felt, what she liked and disliked. For example, approximately 4 years ago I became addicted to a video game. At the time, I had no idea what I was doing wrong, but after a few weeks, she told me I wasn't making her happy and that I needed to pay more attention to our relationship, which I did. I kept gaming to a bare minimum. Bro, I enjoyed the way she spoke, walked and laughed. I adored her appearance. She had a beautiful grin. I even liked how she usually sneezes 8 to 10 times in a row. But as of right now, all of those sentiments I had, or have, are quickly dissipating. As for our sex life, I'll make it brief. We didn't have much sex. Since we got married, I'd guess it's been twice a month on average. In my opinion, it was always fantastic, though I'm not sure about hers anymore. Thinking back, we both always climaxed, unless she faked it, which I doubt. The sex act wasn't that thrilling. We always performed the same 3 or 4 positions and that was it. Update 1. Okay, I made several calls yesterday. In the Netherlands, we have something called a mediator, who handles all elements of divorce. This mediator handles the lawyer's work, including financial and emotional discussions. It's like an all-in-one individual assisting 2 people with their divorce. Today, we spoke with this mediator. Unfortunately, my soon-to-be ex's car broke down, and I had to pick her up. For yes, I had to for this to work for the divorce to be finalized. It is critical that both of us attend the meetings with the mediator. Anyway, the talk went well, as predicted. We both indicated our desire to be divorced, but the adultery was never acknowledged. I didn't think it was worth stating that the mediator is neutral and does not take sides. Also, in the Netherlands, there are no rules against cheating, thus she has the same rights as if she hadn't cheated. We remained seated at the table after the mediator had left, barely speaking. Our cats roaming about were the only diversion. After a few minutes, I inquired if she had anything further to say and she said, no. I thus said, okay then, I think you can go now because I don't want you here. She asked, can you take me home? I declined, saying, how you get home is your own problem. I'm not in the mood to drive 30 minutes to get you home. She looked emotional. I believe she expected me to drive her home because, in the past, I had done everything for her. After that, she called her mother, who will pick her up in about an hour. She left the house stating, I'm going for a walk for about an hour until mom arrives to pick me up. She seemed hurt and emotional as she departed, but I'm staying strong. I still notice a lot of unusual behavior on her part, and I believe she is still in the affair fog. Despite everything, I still love her for who she was, but for the time being, I'm staying tough and treating her as if she meant nothing to me. Edit. As of right now, she means nothing to me. She is just no longer the woman I loved and remained faithful to. Query. I have a query that requires some context. For the past 11 years, I have worked as a driver for a transportation firm called Supertrans. I resigned that job 4 months ago and got a new one with another transportation firm. Around 1.5 years ago, I secured my soon-to-be ex a job at Supertrans. She worked in the office, and I was the driver. I also know her affair partner, AP, who works in the warehouse at Supertrans. Because I worked there for 11 years, I know everyone in the Supertrans office. Everyone liked me, and I was close friends with some of the dispatchers. As far as I know, my old co-workers, her present co-workers, are aware that we are divorcing, but no one is aware that she is, or has been, having an affair with AP, a warehouse employee. Her direct co-worker, who works at the desk next to her, is a 32-year-old gay man who was also present on the night my wife cheated. I will call him Thomas. However, he left early that night. Thomas was one of my favorite persons at their office, and he also liked me a lot. My soon-to-be ex is currently on vacation and will return to work next Monday. I know Thomas likes me and wants the best for me. I'm seriously considering sending Thomas a message explaining what occurred and revealing the affair to him. Of course, I'd like to warn him that my wife has no morals and cannot be trusted. I mean, Thomas has to work with her on a daily basis. I want him to understand what kind of person my soon-to-be ex is. I also plan to inform him who the AP is because Thomas was with them the night she cheated. I want Thomas to understand how morally bankrupt the AP is, and I understand that this may appear to be a desire for vengeance. I suppose I do. This woman has put me through hell. I mentioned a few weeks ago that I would love to hear about her having a bad day at work next Monday since her co-workers knew she deceived me and had an affair. Really, everyone liked me. I've known the majority of her staff for more than 10 years. Furthermore, I have the option of telling or not telling anyone about her adultery. Okay. So this isn't the question I intended to ask. Should I do this? But I believe I've already made up my mind. I'd like to hear your thoughts on it and why you think I should or should not. Update 2. You've all been a tremendous assistance in my predicament. I must admit that I am mentally exhausted, but overall, I am doing better than I could have expected after only 6 weeks. I have a question regarding my soon-to-be ex-wife's current behavior. Is it common for my soon-to-be ex to treat everyone around her as trash, except her AP and her own parents, I suppose? She is clearly treating me horribly, with no respect, as if I were the worst spouse ever. She claims she's been miserable for several years, which I think is pure nonsense. Anyway, I don't really care what she's doing to me anymore. She's wrecking her life, not mine, but it's having an impact on others as well. My father gave her the sweetest note he'd ever given. And she didn't even respond with a thank you, nothing. After my mother died in February of last year, my wife would often take my father to a nearby amusement park. They both have subscriptions to it, so they go very frequently. My father adored her, and I am witnessing him age by the hour, which saddens me deeply. My soon-to-be ex-wife does not even send a thank you note. She simply leaves him to read. She also stated that she wanted to be close friends with my younger sister, but they have not spoken in several weeks. Also, my wife was meant to spend the day with her best friend, a common friend of ours, but she is now ignoring her. Her best friend texted her numerous times yesterday, wondering whether today was still on, but my wife did not respond or even check her texts. She also didn't answer the phone. So today, when they were meant to meet, the same thing happened. She didn't answer the phone. Her BFF sent her one more message, wondering whether she was still coming. No response. She didn't even read the messages, even though her WhatsApp status reveals she was online after they were sent. Needless to say, her best friend has been crying all day. She took the day off to spend with my wife, go shopping, and have fun, and then this happened. Is this typical behavior for someone in an affair fog, or might it be something else? I don't care what my wife is doing. I'm done with her, but this is so awful for her best friend. She's been crying on her couch all day because my wife treats her this way. While I'm composing this, another question comes to mind, but I believe I already have the answer. My soon-to-be ex-wife is telling everyone we broke up because we grew apart and she hasn't been happy in years. I believe it is typical for a cheater to make excuses and not be open about what happened and how they fell in love with someone else. Oh, I almost forgot something really crucial. Her BFF, a common buddy, really stayed with us for 6 months, from November 2021 to April 2022. She had recently gotten out of a nasty relationship and had no place to stay. We had an extra room, so we brought her in. Anyway, my wife and her best friend actually discussed everything, including our relationship and sex life. Everything. I talk to her best friend every day and she's been extremely lovely and completely honest with me. I asked her whether anything my wife had said about being unhappy with me for an extended length of time was genuine. BFF claims it's all lies. My wife has never mentioned anything to her, nor has she expressed any displeasure with me. Keep in mind that they told each other everything except their feelings of unhappiness. So either my soon-to-be ex-wife is clearly lying now, I'm not sure why, possibly to explain her cheating on me and fleeing our marriage, or she has kept her unpleasant feelings hidden from absolutely everyone but herself. I honestly do not know. But in my experience, I've never noticed her being dissatisfied with me, and BFF agrees. Many thanks again, everyone. Your help has been invaluable, and I would not be where I am today without it. Edit, I honestly hope karma hits her hard, sooner rather than later. Also, when people ask me why we're getting divorced, I tell them the truth about her being a selfish cheater. Just yesterday, a female acquaintance shared my communications from my wife and her. The discussion went like this. Oh my God, honey, is it true you and your husband are separated? My wife said, yes, sadly, this is the truth. The companion inquired, oh my God, no, what happened? My wife responded, yeah, well, we just grew apart over the last few years and have different life goals. We chose to terminate it. Needless to say, I corrected this and told our friend the truth, that my wife cheated on me, pretended to be in love and abandoned me for another man. Everyone who learns the truth from me is shocked. By the way, no one, including myself, expected my wife to do this. Update 3. I plan to make a new post in a few weeks. For now, I'm fine. When I realized she was out there living her life without me, I began doing the same. I spoke with my soon-to-be ex-wife several times, and the conclusion seemed to be that she still loved me, but it wasn't fun anymore. Which is not surprising given my mother's unexpected death in February. She claims to be in love with the AP, but without any strings attached. I never saw her being dissatisfied with me, and she even stated that she was unhappy with life in general. So what I believe happened was that she cheated, developed affections for AP and abandoned me for him. Once that was evident, I decided to let her go and focus on myself. At this point, I don't care what she's doing or if she'll return. I am fine either way. Work is going well. I've joined a gym and have been going 3 times a week. My muscles are hurting, and I've been talking to this lovely girl since childhood. Even though it's only friendship, I'm grateful to have a female friend with whom I can chat about anything. She lost her father last year, so we can all empathize with losing a parent. So sure, I'm fine. Regarding the divorce, we had to acquire a large number of documents, which were then forwarded to the mediator. We are currently waiting to hear from him before scheduling our next meeting and moving forward with the divorce. As of right now, I've already decided that the divorce will proceed, regardless of whether my soon-to-be ex-wife returns. Divorce is inevitable since the marriage has ended. Update 4. We'll sign our divorce papers and make it official in 4 days. This is going to be a long post because I haven't updated in nearly 4 months. Well, I made some blunders along the way, but I also made movements that restored my power and made me respect myself again. For starters, 5 months after the first shock, I no longer think about or feel affected by the adultery. So, for everyone going through a difficult period, please believe me, it will get better, and time is on your side. After adultery and our breakup, I committed blunders. I begged, pleaded, became angry, furious, and felt completely out of control, as if she had lost her mind. This persisted for around 2 months. Unfortunately, after this period, I decided to stop whining. I told her that I had given it a lot of thought and that I would still be open to seeing her and talking to her, that I believed there might be a future for us, but that I couldn't guarantee anything. I have not contacted her in the last 3 months, at least not about casual matters or the relationship. The only things I inquired about were our upcoming divorce, finances, and our shared house. I didn't just sit and wait for the past 3 months. I am now 32 years old, and for the first time in my life, I went to the gym to work out, muscle building specifically, as I have always been on the slim side. For the past 3 months I've been going to the gym 4 times a week with complete dedication. I'm also seeing an improvement in my muscles and appearance. However, this goes beyond. The gym not only improves my physical look, but it also benefits my mental health. At first I started working out to keep myself occupied and distracted, but 3 months later, I look and feel much better about myself. I'm rediscovering confidence that I didn't realize I had. Pro tip of the day. When you're going through a difficult moment, the gym seems to help both physically and mentally. Regarding our shared house, I spoke with the bank, and I'm able to lend more money and take on a larger mortgage. I have to pay my ex-wife approximately $65K for the house, but I am able and will do so. After signing everything and paying her, I will be the only owner of the mutual house, which is worth approximately $300,000. I'm not happy about having to pay her $65K, but in the long term, I'm far better off owning my own home, which is worth roughly 5 times that amount. Furthermore, she no longer has her own home. She officially lives with her mother again, but I know she frequently visits AP's place. I'm not contacting her, so how do I know? I will get to that. My ex and I share a mutual buddy. We never hang out together, but we do communicate on a regular basis. As far as I know, my ex left me to be with AP and immediately began a new relationship. I'm not sure what's going on with my ex, and at times it appears she's lost her mind. I try to keep my thoughts away from her, but occasionally they travel where they shouldn't. At the moment, I think I could refer to AP as BF because that's what he is now. However, I will stick with AP because that is how it began. Anyway, concerning AP and my ex-wife, karma is a B********, and it's beginning to bite hard. When my ex and AP first got together 5 months ago, everything appeared fine for them. However, the tables are starting to turn. AP is currently at home suffering from depression, which I know since a common acquaintance showed me screenshots of a chat between my ex-wife and her. Additionally, AP is currently out of work. Even when the infidelity initially occurred, I always felt superior to AP due to his lack of morality. And I had already concluded that he was worthless in comparison to me. Well, now I know for certain, which makes me feel like my ex-wife has gone insane. I'm not conceited, but I am certain that I am the catch and a far superior man than her AP. A little extra. At the beginning of their relationship, I was still contacting and warning her. Well, I think I was correct all along. Not only does AP prove himself to be the loser I suspected he was, but he also introduces her to a substance that has the potential to destroy her life. I discovered this through a mutual buddy. I haven't spoken with my ex-wife about it. If she wants to trash her own life, that is her choice, but it appears to be going bad quickly. My ex-wife is undoubtedly struggling and may even be questioning her own decisions. I hadn't spoken or seen her over the holidays, Christmas and New Year's. However, around a week into the new year, 2023, she texted me unexpectedly, asking if I was home and if she could come over. She came over to my house and the visit lasted only about 5 minutes. She stopped by to tell me she had spent Christmas Day alone, sobbing. She inquired about my holidays and how I was doing. I informed her that my Christmas was okay, but not the best. I lost my mother last year, and these were the first holidays without her, so it was decent but not amazing. However, I told her I was doing well, which I am. So for me, this was strange. The only thing I can think about from this entire visit and why she would be concerned about how I'm doing is whether she has any regrets. Time will tell. I also chatted with my ex's mother. My ex-mother-in-law called after New Year's to wish me a happy new year and best wishes. I must admit that I did not expect the call, but it was great to hear from her because she had been a part of our family for the past 8 years. My mother-in-law told me that my ex-wife hasn't been doing so well lately. Apparently, she is quite sad and crying a lot since she is mourning her marriage. My ex even told her mother, "I wish it wouldn't have to be like this," implying that she is having second thoughts. However, only my ex has the ability to reach out and make a move, which I do not anticipate happening at this time. The only authority I truly have is to grant her the divorce she requested and then walk away from her life, which I did. I am separating myself from her life, divorcing her, and improving myself every day. I apologize for the lengthy message, but I believe this covers all I needed to say. We will sign the divorce papers 4 days from now. Even though I'm doing well, I'm still human, and I still mourn our marriage and my ex-wife on occasion. I'm sorry to see what's happened to her, but I'm also aware that it's beyond my control and not my concern. Let me conclude by thanking everyone in this community. Many thanks. Without your assistance, I would not be where I am today, both emotionally and physically. Am I the jerk for kicking out my sister's boyfriend after he rejected the dinner I spent hours cooking? Original post, September 15, 2024. So here's what happened. I, 28F, invited my sister, 25F, and her boyfriend, 26M, over for dinner. I love cooking and have spent hours preparing this fancy meal. Homemade pasta, a slow-cooked ragu, a salad, and a tiramisu for dessert. I was really proud of it and excited to have them over. When they arrived, everything was fine at first. We sat down and I started serving the food. Her boyfriend, let's call him Steve, stared at the pasta for a moment, then looked at me and said, "I don't eat carbs." At first I thought he was joking, but nope, he was dead serious. He goes on about how he's super into keto and carbs are the enemy. Okay, fine, that's his choice. But when I offered to make him a salad or something else on the spot, he refused and said that I should have known about his diet beforehand. This is where it gets weird. He then pulls out a small Tupperware container from his bag, filled with what looked like boiled chicken and broccoli, and starts to eat it at my dinner table while the rest of us are trying to enjoy the meal I spent hours making. I was stunned and, honestly, kind of insulted. I told him it was rude to bring his own food without mentioning it to me beforehand, and he should have at least given me a heads up. He then goes off about how people need to respect his dietary choices, and that I was being controlling by not accommodating his needs. At this point, I'd had enough. I told him, if you can't eat what's served and won't even let me make something else, then maybe you should just get out. He stood up, said something like, "I'm just trying to be healthy," grabbed his Tupperware and walked out. My sister stayed for a bit but eventually left too, saying I overreacted. Now my sister's mad at me, saying I embarrassed her boyfriend and made them both feel unwelcome. My mom thinks I should apologize, but my friends are on my side, saying Steve was being incredibly rude. AITA for telling him to get out? OOP's comment. Top comment. Commenter, your sister didn't give you a heads up about his diet. OOP, honestly, no, she didn't. I'm not sure if she even knew how serious he was about the whole keto thing because she never mentioned it. She eats pretty much anything, so I assumed he was the same. But even if she had, I feel like it still would have been polite for him to at least say something beforehand instead of just showing up with his own meal. I would have happily made something keto-friendly if I had known. There is no consensus bot on AITA, but top comments were NTA update post, September 21st, 2024, 6 days later. Well y'all, buckle up because things have escalated in a way I never expected. After my initial post, I figured things would calm down once my sister had time to cool off. Spoiler alert, they did not. So the day after I told Steve to leave, my sister texts me saying they want to talk things through at a family dinner. I assumed it would be just the three of us, maybe at a neutral restaurant, where we could hash it out like adults. Nope. Instead, my sister invites my parents, my brother, and Steve's parents to this dinner at my parents' house, turning it into some kind of weird intervention. I show up thinking it'll just be a casual conversation, but the moment I walk in, Steve's mom, let's call her Carol, is already going off about how Steve has always had special dietary needs, and how people who care about him should respect his boundaries. The woman acts like the guy has a life-threatening allergy, not a trendy diet. My mom is sitting there looking super uncomfortable, while my dad's just quietly sipping his beer, clearly wishing he were anywhere else. So Carol starts listing off Steve's dietary restrictions and she's acting like I personally offended the whole keto community by serving pasta. Then, brace yourselves, Carol pulls out a folder. Yes, a literal folder, with printouts. She hands one to me, one to my mom, and one to my dad. I'm flipping through this thing and it's full of Steve's dietary guidelines, suggested meal plans, and even a list of keto-friendly restaurants we could go to in the future. At this point, I'm doing everything I can not to laugh, but it gets worse. Steve pipes up and says he's willing to forgive me for disrespecting his lifestyle, if I agree to host a redo dinner where I follow his dietary restrictions to the letter. He says this will prove I'm serious about making amends and respecting his needs going forward. I thought he was joking, but no, he was dead serious. He even pulled out his phone to show me some keto recipe apps that I might find helpful. I was in total shock. My sister, by the way, said absolutely nothing during all of this. Just staring at her plate like she wanted to disappear. My mom, bless her, tries to smooth things over by suggesting we all just eat whatever we want when we're together, but Carol snaps, "It's not that simple." She says that in their family, they all follow keto together. And that's why Steve is so passionate about it. At this point, I've had enough. I stood up and said, Look, I'm not redoing the dinner. I'm not making anyone a special keto feast. If Steve can't eat what I cook, that's fine, but bringing his own meal to my dinner without even telling me was disrespectful, and I'm not apologizing for feeling that way. And then, this is where it gets absolutely bonkers. Steve's dad stands up, points at me and says, "This is exactly why Steve doesn't trust women to understand him. They always make it about themselves." The whole room went silent. My dad finally spoke up, saying, "I think it's time for you all to leave," and started walking toward the door, basically escorting Steve's parents out. Steve and my sister stayed behind, but Steve was furious. He started yelling about how families should support each other, and then accused me of trying to sabotage their relationship because I'm jealous of what they have. At that point, I just walked out and left the whole mess behind. Here's the kicker, though. A couple of days later, my sister called me and told me she and Steve were taking a break because she needed time to think. Apparently, this whole keto fiasco was the last straw in a long list of controlling behavior from Steve. She didn't realize just how bad it was until the whole family saw it play out at dinner. She even told me that Steve had been trying to get her to follow his diet for months, but she was hiding snacks in her car just to get a break from all the keto madness. So now, Steve's gone full radio silent, my sister is staying with me for the time being, and I'm still getting passive-aggressive texts from Carol about how hurt Steve is, and how he's just misunderstood. Honestly, I'm just glad my sister is finally seeing how controlling this guy was. TLDR. Steve's keto obsession led to a full-blown family intervention where his mom handed out dietary guidelines, and now my sister is taking a break from him because she realized how controlling he is. After abandoning us for his online girlfriend and vanishing for 8 years, my husband suddenly reappears with an offer to rejoin our lives. I, 40F, would want everyone's perspective since I'm unsure about a recent choice I made for my family and am feeling mixed about. My world went upside down 8 years ago when Robert, my husband, abruptly said he was leaving the children and me. Online he had met a woman and developed feelings for her. His choice came out of nowhere and rocked me. For weeks Robert had been acting distant and unusual, but I had written off his behavior as stress due to his job. After more than 10 years of marriage, we stayed by each other through thick and narrow. I had never given infidelity any thought. Robert said at last one evening that he had met someone. Those words tore at my heart. He shouted out that the woman, Isabella, was the hottest woman he had ever seen. Her name is having spent the past 3 months in conversation with her, he developed a relationship that led him to see he was dissatisfied in our marriage. Every word he said sliced right through me like a knife. In my stomach I felt a whirl of wrath mixed with hopelessness. Though he couldn't hide his affections for Isabella, he kept reassuring me he still loved us. He claimed he had to visit her personally to find out whether it would go anywhere. A whirl of feelings swamped me and I couldn't make sense of what was happening. Our house seemed as though its walls were squeezing in on me. As I questioned him whether he was leaving us and the kids for this woman, my voice faltered. He nodded hesitantly, stating he had to do this for himself even if he wasn't sure I would grasp. Having given it a lot of thought, he was scheduled to meet her and begin a fresh life. He advised me he was prepared to help us financially as much as he could, but he had to follow his heart and satisfy the love of his life. All around me the world collapsed. It still astounded me that my husband was leaving our children and me for someone he had never personally known. Screaming, pleading, doing anything to get him to remain came first. But from his countenance, I realized he had already decided what to do. There was no reverse. Robert left us to tell our kids their father wouldn't be returning, moving out the next week. At 9 years old, Emily asked 1,000 questions, but I knew no responses. Just 4 years old at the time, Nathan clung to me as though he felt something was badly wrong and struggled to really understand the gravity of the situation. During this period I felt numb and broken. My children were the only thing keeping me from drowning in my grief. When I first told my family about Robert, they responded exactly like me. They simply couldn't comprehend why on earth my husband of so many years would do something like this. Although my parents encouraged me to pursue this legally, at the time in my life I lacked much to inspire me. I still thought my spouse would return to us. When Robert's parents learned their son had left us, they looked completely devastated and powerless. He repeated the same narrative even though they begged him to come back over several calls. Days finally stretched into weeks, then weeks into months. I was left to gather the fragments for the kids as well as for my benefit. Around us, our family and friends came together to provide encouragement and a sympathetic ear. Though the hurt of my husband's betrayal persisted, I concentrated on securing a job so Emily and Nathan would have a steady home. Robert's parents were quite helpful during this period. They provided financial support and watched the children whenever I needed a break. 8 years have gone by and Robert's only remembrance in our life now is a far-off one. Apart from that, he never contacted the children or me. He used to send us money on occasion. Over the years, I have essentially turned into a single mother, working nonstop to raise her kids and give them the love and care they so richly deserve. Emily stopped attempting to get in touch with her father and learnt not to bring him up even though she thought about him sometimes. Nathan never even mentioned him since his memory was so much hazier. Though it hurts to lose their father, they have both grown up to be amazing people. Robert's father died suddenly not so long ago. We all went to his funeral. His family attorney later told us he wanted to speak with me about his will. Robert's father had left some money for his grandkids, the lawyer said. Though it wasn't much, it may assist pay for my children's college tuition. Sitting with my kids, I told them the news they wouldn't have to worry about college costs going forward. Their smiles radiated delight, and seeing their contentment was quite lovely. Knowing that after such a protracted period of uncertainty we have one less worry on our plate felt like a weight has been taken off. I got a call last week from a number I don't know. Unbelievably, Robert was on the other side of the line. After 8 years, I was speechless to hear his voice and felt a flood of contradictory feelings. He paused, then said he wanted to see me right away. I begged him to clear me since I was perplexed. He kept requesting to meet me and said he wanted to talk to me about an offer. Why he was phoning now after so many years of silence eluded me. His continuous calls were hard to ignore, hence I paused to collect my ideas and at last decided to meet with him, though warily. The meetup was scheduled, and we agreed to meet close to my workplace in a cafe. A rush of questions and uncertainty swept over me as I hung off the conversation, making me nervous about seeing him after so many years. I chose not to tell my children anything until after I saw what this offer entailed. The days preceding our planned conference were an emotional roller coaster. In my thoughts, I couldn't help but go back over the years of trying to come to terms with Robert's abandonment, the agony of his abrupt death, and the challenges of raising our children alone. I arrived early on the day of our meeting and anxiously drank my coffee while waiting for Robert. Not long after, he came in, determined but also hesitant as he approached me. He seemed older, worn, and oddly unlike the man I had married. Our first conversation consisted of awkward pauses and cautious phrases. We sidestepped the elephant in the room, concentrating instead on friendly welcomes and catching up on the years gone by. We seemed to be two strangers negotiating the traces of a former life. Robert eventually plucked the confidence and started to explain why he had suddenly returned into our life. He mentioned how Isabella did not match the woman he had imagined her to be. She was, it turns out, a single mother too, but she had never told him the truth until he had left us and was standing on her doorstep. Their relationship was fraught with difficulties mostly related to her gambling addiction, which caused her to blow all his money. Although they argued often, Robert had decided to support her since he was reluctant to abandon someone else once more. But he came to see how fleeting life was to remain in a miserable circumstance every day until his father died recently. He talked about how much he missed everyone back home and how let down he felt about the decisions he had taken 8 years ago. Robert went on stating he had considered returning to us several times over the years but lacked the will to face us. Then he said that his father had left him their large lake house, which we used for vacations before Robert left us. He informed me he wished to sell the house, therefore enabling him to be set for the rest of his life. Quietly nodding, I listened to him. Then Robert delivered a bombshell. He said he wants to return to us and provide our kids with opulent living. If I embraced him back into our life, he reassured me I would never have to work once more. He reassured me we could enjoy the rest of our lives free from financial concerns, but I looked at him with incredulity. Using the bequest to create a better life together, Robert basically wanted us to heal and offer our family a second shot. I gave Robert's comments much thought, knowing the possible advantages the inheritance could offer for our family. But it was impossible to forget all the years he had missed, leaving me to look after our kids. Though the concept of financial stability appealed to me, I couldn't overlook the suffering and resentment accumulated over years of his absence. I thus told him quite honestly that although I valued the offer, I couldn't forget the last 8 years. I said I had been juggling job and raising the children alone. Although we may not have everything, we led stable lives and I cannot risk subjecting my kids and me to suffering once more. I wanted to keep them safe and wasn't sure if I could ever rely on him not to vanish once more. Desperate, Robert kept begging me to change her mind. But I knew that if I let him back into our life, I would be greatly risking the stability of our family. Though the idea of turning down his offer hurt, especially given the financial comfort it may provide, I couldn't ignore the emotional scars he had left behind. Since my encounter with Robert, my parents have been urging me to change my mind about turning down his offer. They keep reminding me that following everything he has put us through, the least he could do now is provide our children and me a better life free from financial concerns. According to my parents, people may grow and maybe Robert has seen his faults and wants to really repair our family. They believe I am selfish and want me to put the comfort of my children above my pain. I had been battling my decision late into many sleepless nights. I haven't been able to get myself to share with my kids Robert's comeback. Their reaction to the news and their handling of the concept of their father returning into their life following 8 years of absence worry me. Between the terrible recollections of our past and the possible advantages of taking Robert's offer, I have second-guessed my own judgment. So Reddit, am I the bad guy for turning down Robert's offer and maybe holding my kids and ourselves away from a better life? Update 1. In a few days, people left hundreds of comments and messages for me. That most of you don't believe I'm in the wrong makes me happy. After considering everyone's recommendations, I realized it was time to talk candidly with Robert's kids. Having him resurfaced in their life and shocking them was the last thing I wanted. After supper, I sat Emily and Nathan down today to gently introduce the topic. I started by sharing with them the surprising return of their father and his offer to re-enter our life. Their expressions showed a mixture of uncertainty and interest as they worked to grasp what I was saying. Their responses differed depending on whether I told them he had inherited the lake house and wanted to sell it to aid us financially. Now 17 years old, Emily displayed a range of feelings, from shock to fury. She couldn't understand why Robert wanted to come back after so many years and was as perplexed as I was. She remembered the suffering she had experienced in his absence even if she also missed her father occasionally. Originally she said she had missed having a father figure in her life, but she finally learnt to live without him and no longer wanted him back. Now 12 years old, Nathan told us he didn't remember Robert at all, hence he didn't really care about my turning down the offer. He battled to understand the whole ramifications of the circumstances. Since I valued their opinions and feelings, I informed them straightforwardly whatever they decided would happen. Nathan consented, claiming he was happy with things as they were. Emily said she had absolutely no want to meet him. Though the idea of maybe healing our family appealed to me. I knew the scars from the past ran deep and my children's welfare came first in my mind. Walking away from Robert that day in the cafe was the right decision I made. After that, I meant to discuss the next line of action with my parents. Though he departed before we could proceed with a divorce, I never intended on being married to Robert, against what most people believe. Although I lacked the means to challenge him at the time, I have come to see that there is no reason in keeping married to this man anymore. Update 2. Over the past 2 weeks, Robert's unrelenting calls had grown even more desperate. He kept phoning even after I told him I wanted him gone. Being a non-confrontational person, his persistent attempts to approach me made me feel cornered and emotionally exhausted. I worried he would show up at my place of employment or pay the children visits at the school out of the blue. I was so determined it was time to get in touch with his mother. She looked to be the sole one who could assist me to grasp his motives and handle his unrelenting search since she knew of his reappearance. I visited with her to let her know I wanted to formally call it quits with him and to let her know I was annoyed with his continuous calls. His mother explained the true reason behind his tenacity during this talk. She said that when Robert's father left him the lake house, he had included a well-crafted clause. Only if he came back to our family could he become the house owner. I had to sign the paperwork also to support his claim to the house. This realization stunned and disgusted me. I at last realized why Robert had been following me for several weeks. His main motivation for getting in touch was to get ownership of the house, not a sincere want to atone or reconcile. The whole scenario seemed like a merciless emotional manipulation, thus I had to give much thought to my next action. It was time to act after I found Robert's actual goals. Especially one based on deception and secrets. I wanted to break out from a relationship. I have begun searching right now for a lawyer to assist with rapid divorce preparation. I have also discussed with my parents, who regret advising me to give his proposition some thought. They are encouraging of my choice to proceed with the divorce since they now realize he hasn't changed over the years. They are sorry for ever advising me to pay attention to him. I have blocked Robert so he cannot trouble me going forward. When I serve him with divorce paperwork, I want to see him personally. Update 3. My previous update 2 months ago and now I can at last offer a cheerful one. I reached out to Robert under the guise of meeting since, as I had indicated, I was going to deliver the divorce papers. He signed right away. Emily and Nathan wanted to see their father one final time. They had many questions, and I felt it was important for them to get some closure despite the hurt of the past. We set up a meeting in a neutral location, a nearby park where we had many joyful family memories before Robert left. While Nathan clutched to my side uneasily, Emily's eyes were full with questions and doubt as she stared at her father. I began by telling him I knew his actual reason for getting in touch after so long. Robert objected that he really wanted us to give him another chance, Not only the phrase in his father's will that drove him. Knowing I could not believe another word this man spoke, I shook my head in disgust. We were done. I informed him, and the least he could do to provide our kids some closure was respond to their questions. He nodded quietly. Emily first asked him whether it was worth it to be leaving us for another woman. Robert said he was disoriented and had made a terrible mistake, ashamed looking down. With a more direct approach, Nathan asked him if discovering his happiness came before abandoning his wife and children. Robert inhaled deeply, then said he wasn't thinking well at the time and acknowledged he was mistaken in leaving us. Strong and perceptive, my children were not happy with only those responses. Saying he was in a midlife crisis, Robert tried to defend his affair. Robert revealed sensitive aspects of his life with Isabella, the challenges they encountered, and his awareness that he had been running after a mirage as the talk went on. Though I doubted Emily and Nathan thought he was credible, they listened carefully. They wanted to know why he had never stayed in touch and whether he truly regretfully left us. There was agony in the voices of my children. Robert said he had been paralyzed by his own guilt and had no idea how to deal with the fallout from his behavior. He underlined again that he could give us a luxurious life right now and that he wanted us to be whole once more. Looking into the eyes of my children, I realized the choice was obvious. They shared my lack of belief. They would not let Robert waltz back into our life paying money as a temporary repair for the harm he had done. It was a matter of ethics, of defending the courage and resiliency my children and I had displayed over his absence during the preceding 8 years. Resolved, I informed him we had moved past him and we no longer needed his money or him. As he examined the divorce paperwork, I could see a mixture of regret and disappointment. Saying he really wanted to make up for those lost years, he begged me, but I was firm in my decision. Then he told me we could both gain from it if he promised to divide the lake house selling earnings with me. Emily said we didn't need his charity money, and Nathan nodded in agreement, adding we had what we needed to be happy. I suppose Robert started to cry at this moment as he at last understood what a major error he had made. He continued apologizing to the children, realizing he had made a horrible mistake by abandoning us and knew we could never pardon him. That day I felt free at last as I strolled away from the park hand in hand with Emily and Nathan. I had never realized how big of a load I had silently carried for the benefit of my kids. Watching my kids stand up for me and have my back felt great. Our divorce will follow my determination. Though I know it may be some time until I am formally free of him, I intend to take some time off to spend with my kids in between. We have been eagerly awaiting this trip for a long time. Going to Disneyland. To help offset the terrible memories of the past, I want to build lovely memories full of laughter and happiness with my children. I know that we can boldly and resiliently confront whatever the future presents as long as we have each other. My children and I are on a road toward healing and building a new, solid, and honest life despite the difficulties and emotional upheaval we have gone through. Though this chapter is far from finished, we will be creating our own story from now on, and I'm resolved to make sure it is one full of love, trust, and development. Update 4. I have some fantastic news to share since my previous post. It feels like a major success since I was promoted at my job. It took me some time to get here, but at last I am making a decent living that will let me give much more for my family. Along with financial stability, the encouragement makes one happy to know that their effort has paid off. The divorce process is running smoothly overall at last. After knowing the background between my husband and me, I have engaged a great attorney who is sure the divorce will go without a hitch. Though it could not be easy, our closure and a fresh start depend on it. Over this period, my family and friends have been at my side offering encouragement. Having more than enough now, I intend to send my kids to therapy. Knowing that my kids can struggle with abandonment, I want them to better manage their feelings and go over any residual worries. After looking at therapists who specialize in handling such problems, I came across a sympathetic and seasoned one who focuses on guiding children and families through challenging emotions. As a parent, meanwhile, I think about encouraging my children to explore hobbies outside of their course of study. Emily, my daughter, spends hours painting exquisite works of art for our house. She has a great gift for it. Nathan, my son, has always been naturally gifted at soccer. We spend our weekends supporting him at his games. Seeing my kids living vibrant lives makes me proud. About Robert, we haven't gotten in touch and I think it's better to keep it that way. As many of you rightly guessed, one day Isabella, his affair partner, approached me out of the blue. The message was hatred and animosity toward me for purportedly stealing Robert away from her, not an apology as one would expect from the other woman. She blamed me for their relationship failing and charged me with being the reason he left. Isabella attacked me in her letters, calling me names and leveling cruel charges. She asked me why I had brought Robert back to our family and said I had coached him. The messages were hostile and disturbing, and the degree of her wrath overwhelmed me. This woman had the guts to be upset with me when she was the reason my family split 8 years ago, and it astounded me. I answered her saying I was in the process of divorcing Robert and that I had no want to remain with him. She had no right to get in touch with me, so I reminded her of the suffering and uncertainty our family had experienced when Robert left for her. I underlined how my children had endured, and how our lives had been inverted all those years ago. I made it plain that I never wanted him back and that she should blame her gambling addiction and herself if she needed to assign blame. After delivering the message, I blocked her, hopefully preventing her from trying to get in touch once more. I want her to not ruin the quiet life my kids and I have created. Regarding Robert's mother, I do chat to her occasionally since she has always been polite to me. She wants me to do whatever it takes to be happy and admits her remorse on the way things have gone. Fascinatingly, his mother also stated that the lake house would not be coming to him as his father had intended, since my decision not to reunite with Robert would prevent that. Though it felt right, this discovery surprised me. Robert should pay the consequences, as his self-serving choices had not only destroyed our family but also hurt another. It is time to step forward and bid the past behind us. Although the road is difficult, the mending process is under active progress. With every day, our future seems more promising as my children are flourishing. Am I the asshole for refusing lunch with my girlfriend's mom to honor my late brother's memorial tradition? Original post, September 20th, 2024. Throwaway account. INM, 30, lost my younger brother when I was 22. He had cancer and fought very hard. Ever since, I've been donating blood on the anniversary of his death every year. I take the day off from work, visit his grave, donate blood, and then come home, relax, and watch his favorite movie. I know it's a simple, personal tradition, but it means a lot to me. My girlfriend of 9 months, Anna, F., 31, asked if I could meet her and her mom. I have met her many times before and it wasn't the meeting of the parents for the first time, for lunch yesterday. I told her no and explained again about what I do on my brother's death anniversary. She got upset and said, "Well, it's my tradition to have lunch with my mom every time she's in town and she really wanted to see you. You can do your stupid blood donation tradition any day." I explained to her that it's not just about the blood donation. Later in the evening, while I was resting and watching my brother's favorite movie, she texted me again, asking me to join them. I reiterated that I really didn't want to and would hang out with her mom next time. She replied that I had embarrassed her in front of her mom with my selfishness and laziness. Since then, she's been distant. Do I owe her an apology? AITA. Some of OOP's comments. Commenter. Question. Did Anna know about this tradition before her mother came to visit? I'm thinking the answer is yes because you said explained again, but I wanted to verify this. OOP. Yes. I have mentioned it many times before. I think she forgot about the date, so I re-explained that I can't join them that day for that reason. Commenter. NTA. She doesn't respect your tradition, which is 1 day a year. Her mom will probably come to town more than one time in the year. Your girlfriend is selfish and entitled. OOP. Yes, she is retired and lives 3 hours away. She comes here often. Commenter. Your tradition outweighs getting dinner with a visiting relative/in-law. I'm sorry for your loss. I hope you had a good day of remembering him. If I could, what's his face in the movie? OOP. There are 2 actually. LOL. The very first Despicable Me movie and Star Wars, Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. Commenter. Have you watched the new one? I see all the movies my dad would have loved to see from the franchises he loved. OOP. Not yet. I'm planning to watch it with my dad. My mom died when we were kids and my dad raised us alone. On my brother's birthday, Plan B is having him over for a movie night on my brother's birthday if the movie will no longer be in movie theaters in December. Commenter. I think you would need to think very carefully about this. GF. Losing someone you live with is very hard and she is very careless with your feelings. Sorry for your loss. I lost my brother when he was 12 and I was 15. Still miss him. OP, my condolences. I miss him a lot. There are certain video games I can't even look at or play anymore because it was our special thing. Commenter. Downvoted. I see plenty of room for doing lunch with your GF and her mom, and still commemorating your brother's death on the same day. It would have been easy to fit lunch between visiting a grave, drawing blood and seeing a movie. You also missed a chance to invite your GF to partake in your ritual, and instead seem to have just used it as an excuse to not go out with them. You're going to lose a lot more people in life before it's through. I understand death is hard, but it's been nearly a decade. Sometimes clinging to those ancient memories only holds us back. OP. She had never met him. He passed long before my current relationship. She never showed any interest to join and I wasn't expecting her to join. I mean, if she wanted to, she would be more than welcome to join. I didn't exclude her. My brother's is not some ancient memory. We were very close and we only had each other growing up as my dad was working a lot. His memory isn't holding me back in any ways. OP comments 1 hour after posting. I texted Anna that we need to talk after reading the comments. I'm going to end it. I don't have her mom's number unfortunately. OOP 3 hours later when asked for an update. Sure. So far no reply. OOP responds to a downvoted commenter. I'm not apologizing. I sent her a text to meet so I can end it. Expecting to have 1 day out of a year is not too much to ask for. Update. Same post. September 22nd, 2024, 2 days later. I texted her that we needed to talk. She never replied. Just blocked me from everywhere. Social media, WhatsApp. Her best friend who was following me on Instagram blocked me too. I'm not sad. I wanted to end it anyways. Thank you for your support. I really appreciate your kind comments. Some users suggested that my brother/remembrance tradition saved me from getting serious with her and a lifetime of misery, and it made me smile. Thank you again.